Chapter 638. Zhou grew silent. He started to frown. Suddenly Zhou raised his head. His eyes were flickering with lightning. He stared at Zhou Tong and said, "Second brother, what you said is reasonable. The more this Qinyu shines, the more our Thunder Punishment City will lose face. To cut the Gordian knot, it is time for us to directly take care of this Qinyu." Hearing what Zhou said, a pleasantly surprised expression appeared in Zhou Tong's eyes. "However, we must inform third brother and Zhou Ran about this matter. In the end, we must report it to Lord Father." Zhou said, "Third brother, Zhou Ran, quickly come to the Sage Emperor's palace." Zhou directly sent a divine awareness voice transmission. At the moment when the four great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City were gathered to discuss, Qinyu was meeting with Duanmuyu in the Purple Mystic Mansion, above the Fog Marshes Fog City. In the Purple Mystic Mansion's inner lake, Qinyu and Duanmuyu were walking side by side. Duanmuyu smiled and said, "Brother Qinyu, before I came here, I was worried about whether or not Brother Qinyu would possess sufficient strength to gain a foothold. However, after arriving at the Purple Mystic Mansion, I am not worried in the slightest." After arriving at the Purple Mystic Mansion, Duanmuyu saw Yifeng and Zhuqiulin, the two god kings. These two god kings, Qinyu and Jiangli, Duanmuyu knew that there were four god kings. This power was sufficient to stand tall in the divine realm. "Brother Qinyu, I wonder if I should ask you a question?" Duanmuyu's expression suddenly turned serious. Qinyu's heart moved. He said, "Brother Duanmu, please go ahead and ask." Duanmuyu smiled apologetically and said, "When I arrived at your Fog City, I discovered a lot of cultivators that have yet to reach the deity level. I am a bit confused. Could it be that Brother Qinyu had specially teleported to the lower realm by himself and brought them up here? Are they Brother Qinyu's relatives?" "You could say that I brought them up. Practically all of them are disciples of our Qin family. Even if they aren't, they possess a great relationship with me," Qinyu said with a smile. Qinyu would not casually divulge the secrets of the Neoverse. Qinyu was very certain of Duanmuyu's character. However, as for the character of the other god kings of the Light Lens City, Qinyu was unable to be certain. Duanmuyu said with a frown, "Brother Qinyu, please forgive me for not daring to agree with your conduct. You might be trying to have your people from the lower realms experience the life of the divine realm. However, those people from the lower realm can only live in your Fog City. They can't live freely in the divine world until they reach the true God realm. It would be better to let them live freely in the lower realms, instead of living in a prison." "Duanmu." Qinyu was just about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. "Duanmu, trouble has come. I will go out and take care of it first." Qinyu smiled apologetically. Then, without saying anything else, he teleported and disappeared before Duanmuyu. Bang! A heavy collision sound resonated through heaven and earth. The four great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City were standing in the air. As for the Thunder Martial God King, Zhou Tong, who had attacked earlier, he saw that the city walls of the Fog City did not collapse after receiving his attack. Instead, they only trembled slightly. This caused him to reveal an astonished expression. "Formation space?" Zhou Tong immediately determined what was going on. With an indifferent expression, Zhou Wulian said indifferently, "Big brother, I will destroy this Fog City." A cyan-colored short blade appeared in Zhou Wulian's hand. "Oh!" That Zhou Wulian moved his short blade. Then countless blade silhouettes flew toward the Fog City. Each and every blade silhouette contained an astonishing destructive power. Bang! A cyan-gowned figure suddenly appeared before the blade silhouettes. The countless blade silhouettes landed on the cyan-gowned figure in succession. The blade silhouettes dissipated. The cyan-gowned figure was not damaged in the slightest. At the same time, a black-gowned figure appeared beside him. "You wish to destroy my Fog City?" A trace of killing intent appeared between Qinyu's brows. He looked to the four great god kings before him and said, "Attacking without declaring war, a method of sneak attack. It truly conforms to the methods of your Thunder Punishment City." The four great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City all started to frown. Zhou Ran coldly shouted, "Qinyu, there is no need for you to flaunt your glib tongue. You have insulted our Thunder Punishment City time and time again. Today shall be the day that our Thunder Punishment City shall punish you. Punishment? Zhou slightly raised his head. A trace of a smile was present in his eyes. Qin Yu, I had originally wanted to keep you alive for a bit longer. Never would I have expected that you would court death and openly construct this fog city in the divine realm. You all want to kill me? Am I mishearing things? Could it be that you all have some sort of method to kill me? Qin Yu said with a ridiculing smile. Merely, Qin Yu became alert in his heart. Since this Zhou Hua was this confident, especially after knowing that Chu Feng possessed the method to break through the spatial freezing, there was only one possibility. The Thunder Punishment City's Exalted Celestial, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, might be planning to attack. Qin Yu had never seen an Exalted Celestial attack before. Thus, Qin Yu had no idea about the strength of an Exalted Celestial. However, Qin Yu knew that even someone like the Azura God King was powerless to fight back against an Exalted Celestial. Once an Exalted Celestial arrived, he would have no choice but to flee. Li Air, have everyone quickly return to the Purple Mystic Mansion. Quickly. Qin Yu directly sent a mind-voice transmission to Jiang Li. At this moment, Jiang Li also knew how serious the matter was. Thus, she did not say anything and immediately ordered everyone to return to the Purple Mystic Mansion from the Fog City. Qin Yu's spatial energy began to spread out. Once everyone returned to the Purple Mystic Mansion, Qin Yu would immediately send the Purple Mystic Mansion back to the New Cosmos. Qin Yu believed that as long as they returned to the New Cosmos, his loved ones would not be in any danger. At that time, Qin Yu would be able to fight against the people from the Thunder Punishment City without any misgivings. Brother Yu, all of the non-god kings have returned to the Purple Mystic Mansion. Jiang Li's mind-voice transmission soon replied. Qin Yu displayed a smile on his face. With an intention, the Purple Mystic Mansion was directly sent back to the New Cosmos. The gaze with which Qin Yu looked to the four great god kings before him contained a trace of coldness. Originally, I had only planned to deal with Zhou Xian alone. However, since your Thunder Punishment City is so aggressive, you cannot blame me for this. As he thought that, the divine spear Waning Snow appeared in Qin Yu's hand. When they saw the divine spear Waning Snow in Qin Yu's hand, the expressions of the four great god kings turned solemn. This Qin Yu has summoned his clone from the very beginning. Furthermore, he has taken out the divine spear Waning Snow. It would appear that Qin Yu is also planning to fight with his life on the line. Zhou Hua and the others became completely alert. In the eyes of Zhou Hua and the others, Qin Yu was definitely a dead man. Thus, they were not willing to fight with their lives on the line against Qin Yu. Attack, Zhou Hua said via divine awareness voice transmission. However, before Zhou Tong, Zhou Wulian and Zhou Ran were able to attack, they saw countless bamboo trees descending from the sky. It was God King Yifeng's first-rate spiritual treasure, Vast Territory. God King Yifeng, Zhua Qiulin and Jiang Li appeared beside Qin Yu. God King Yifeng had a smile on his face. He said to Qin Yu, the four of them are trapped in my spiritual treasure. They will not be able to escape within the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Very well, I will go in and take care of them. Qin Yu's body moved. He also rushed into the bamboo forest that was floating in midair. A trace of fierceness flashed through God King Yifeng's eyes. He said via divine awareness voice transmission, Qin Yu, I will lend you a hand. As for Jiang Li and Zhua Qiulin, they were merely watching from the side. At this moment, there was simply no need for them to attack. Inside the boundless bamboo forest, at this moment, the four great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City were all trapped in the vast territory. Even though Zhou Hua possessed his clan protection spiritual treasure, it would still take him quite some time to break through the vast territory. As for this period of time, it would be the most dangerous time for the four great god kings. Eldest uncle, what should we do? Zhou Ran asked via divine awareness voice transmission. At this moment, Zhou Ran had a trace of anxiousness in his heart. This vast territory was a first-rate grand miss spiritual treasure. Zhou Ran simply did not possess the strength to break through it. Of the four people that were trapped, only Zhou Hua and Zhou Wulian possessed the strength to break through it. If the two of them were to join hands, they would be able to break through it in a short period of time. Zhou Ran, don't worry. If you encounter an attack, just teleport away. Zhou Hua said via divine awareness voice transmission. This vast territory only has the effect of trapping people. Although it is difficult to break through it, the four of us know each other's location. It is not very possible for others to kill us. Right at the moment when Zhou Hua was speaking via divine awareness voice transmission, a cyan-colored stream of air suddenly arrived before Zhou Hua. One end of that cyan-colored stream of air suddenly turned into a leg. The long leg tore through the sky and kicked out. Even the vast territory spiritual treasure started to tremble. The physical attack of a first-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure was also extremely frightening. However, Zhou Hua still possessed the strength to contend against it. Zhou Hua actually did not try to block it. Instead, he directly teleported away. What a pity. The black gown Qin Yu also appeared. Earlier, if Zhou Hua were to tangle with his clone for a short period of time, his divine spear waning snow would have been sent into Zhou Hua's head. Qin Yu was worried that Zhou Hua would escape. That was the reason why he used his clone, whose attack power was weaker than the divine spear waning snow, to attack Zhou Hua. Never did he expect that even with that, Zhou Hua would still escape. A figure suddenly appeared behind Qin Yu's main body. A cyan-colored blade ray directly hacked toward Qin Yu. The speed of the blade ray was so fast that Qin Yu was unable to block it in time. The person that attacked Zhou Hua was precisely Zhou Wulian, who held a cyan-colored short blade in his hand. Chapter 640. When Qin Yu discovered that the person who had suddenly launched a sneak attack was Zhou Wulian, the vigilance in his heart immediately rose to the extreme. This Zhou Wulian was the person that Qin Yu feared the most among the Thunder Punishment City's 4 great god kings. Although that Zhou Hua possessed a clan protection spiritual treasure, he seemed to be an even greater threat. However, Qin Yu's current understanding of the origin energy had also increased by a lot. It was so much so that his soul had absorbed the universe's origin energy. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not be defeated in 100 battles. Qin Yu naturally did not care about Zhou Hua. However, this Zhou Wulian was different. According to Qin Yu's knowledge, this Zhou Wulian's weapon was only a second-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure. However, his personal strength was extremely powerful. Why was he so powerful? What was so powerful about him? All of this was unknown to Qin Yu. The unknown was the most frightening. The cyan-colored blade ray rapidly hacked toward Qin Yu. Qin Yu was able to tell that the flow of time around the cyan-colored blade ray was sometimes 1,000,000 times faster, and sometimes only several tens of times faster. However, it appeared that the cyan-colored blade ray was extremely harmonious and natural. At the same time, the countless bamboos within the vast territory were actually unable to block the blade ray in the slightest. Bang! When the blade ray approached Qin Yu's body, the blade ray suddenly increased in size. A neat blade mark actually appeared in the space around it. Fortunately, this place was within a first-rate spatial spiritual treasure. The space there was stable. Even a first-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure would not be able to easily break through it. As for Qin Yu himself, he directly teleported away. When Qin Yu reappeared, he was behind the Thunder Nightmare God King, Zhou Wulian. Without the slightest hesitation, he rapidly thrust out the divine spear waning snow in his hand. The divine spear waning snow shaft was faintly agitated with dark and yellow aura. The divine spear waning snow was like a dragon emerging from the water. With absolute killing intent, it pierced toward Zhou Wulian. Its speed was too fast. Teleportation, spear thrust, time acceleration. Everything was coordinated perfectly. If this Zhou Wulian does not wish to die, he can only escape with teleportation. Qin Yu looked at the divine spear waning snow and thrust it toward Zhou Wulian with a might that could break through everything. Qin Yu had absolute confidence in the divine spear waning snow. At this moment, bang! The bamboos around Qin Yu were shattered into powder. Qin Yu's attack was simply too strong. It had even dealt a huge blow to the vast landscape. Zhou Wulian noticed the spear. The cyan-colored short blade in his hand gracefully changed its direction and streaked across a strange curve. Inconceivably, it actually managed to block Qin Yu's spear before it could reach Zhou Wulian's body. However, could the divine spear waning snow be blocked? Huh. Qin Yu's expression suddenly changed. With two extremely soft sounds of collision, Zhou Wulian's cyan dagger gently brushed against the spearhead of the divine spear waning snow like a jumping musical note. The divine spear waning snow lost its accuracy. This was the first time that Qin Yu had encountered someone who actually used softness to counter his divine spear waning snow. Using softness to overcome hardness also depended on the extent of the hardness. With a weapon as terrifying as the divine spear waning snow, there were not many people in the entire divine realm who could do what Zhou Wulian had done. Zhou Wulian's eyes had always been as serene and calm as a deep lake. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but glance at Qin Yu's divine spear waning snow in astonishment. He nodded and said, "Qin Yu, the spear in your hand is truly powerful. Just now, with a slight touch, I could feel the pressure from the divine spear waning snow. However, a weapon is only a part of a person's true strength." Qin Yu smiled. "Zhou Wulian, are you trying to stall for time?" Qin Yu said with a smile. Qin Yu was able to guess Zhou Wulian's current goal. At this moment, Zhou Hu was wholeheartedly trying to break open the vast landscape so that everyone could escape. As for Zhou Wulian, he was here to restrain Qin Yu. In the short exchange just now, Zhou Wulian already knew that he couldn't fight against Qin Yu head-on. Therefore, he was trying to stall for time by talking. "That's right." Zhou Wulian nodded his head indifferently. "Qin Yu, I can sense your strength. For example, the laws of time. You have also reached an extremely high level of time acceleration. Your talent is something that I admire greatly. However, the faster the time acceleration, the better. Sometimes, the faster the slower the better. This is the accumulation of countless years of experience. For example, me. In the entire divine realm, other than the Azura God King, none of the other 8 great sage emperors would be able to kill me, even if they knew spatial freezing. This is experience. Qin Yu properly comprehend it." Qin Yu couldn't help but smile in his heart. Although what Zhou Wulian said was reasonable, would it be useful against him? Qin Yu looked at Zhou Wulian and said with a smile, "Experience is useful against experts of the same level. However, it is useless against experts with absolute strength. For example, no matter how much experience you have, you are still not a match for the Azura God King. Once time stop is used, you can only be trampled upon." Furthermore, Qin Yu pointed the spearhead of the divine spear waning snow upwards. "Just now you have only seen the tip of the iceberg of my divine spear waning snow." Qin Yu curled his lips and said with a smile, "All right, that Zhou Hu should be able to break through this space soon. Before that, I will have a final battle with you." "Final battle?" Zhou Wulian frowned. Qin Yu didn't explain in detail. He only held his spear horizontally and said with a smile, "Be careful." Immediately after, the shaft of the divine spear waning snow shook, and countless spear stars appeared at the spearhead. Like a group of pythons coming out of their caves, the streams of energy swept towards Zhou Wulian. "Third brother, second brother, the two of you should hold on for a while longer. I will be able to break through this sealed space soon." Looking at the emerald green bamboos floating in front of him, Zhou Hu was fully focused on activating the power of the Thunder Origin Spiritual Pearl. The spiritual pearl floating above Zhou Hu's head with electric snakes coiling around it would shrink a little, and then expand into an even larger area. The surrounding bamboos were also shattering unceasingly. Zhou Hu's strategy was very simple. He wanted Zhou Wulian and Zhou Tong to stall Qin Yu first, and then break open the vast territory's spatial spiritual treasure. After breaking through the spatial treasure and returning to the divine realm, they would be able to relax. In the divine realm, they could attack Qin Yu's fog city. If they were no match for him, they could teleport back to the Thunder Punishment City and have the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial take action. Back then, the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial had given the order that during the period between the descent of the Exalted Celestial Mountain and the birth of the new Exalted Celestial, The thunder punishment exalted celestial could only act once. However, before the descent of the exalted celestial mountain, the exalted celestial had the authority to kill several god kings. Why is this Chinyu's luck so good? Not only is he strong, he actually has several god kings helping him. Zhou tried his best to break through the layers of obstructions of the vast territory. Chinyu's main body was fighting against Zhou Wulian. As for Chinyu's clone, he was fighting against Zhou Tong. On the surface, it appeared that Chinyu was being held back by Zhou Tong. However, in reality, if I wanted to disturb Zhou Hua, how could this Zhou Tong possibly stop me? The cyan-robed Qin Yu was like an unparalleled god of war. Punches and kicks would cause space to tremble wherever his punches and kicks passed by. Although it was a simple attack, its power was extremely frightening. With great difficulty, Zhou Tong blocked the cyan-robed Qin Yu's attacks. While he was able to accelerate time, the cyan-robed Qin Yu was also able to do the same. Qin Yu's clone also possessed the new cosmos's spatial energy and the time acceleration sacred ability. Bang! The cyan-robed Qin Yu's main body teleported above Zhou Tong. Head down and legs up, Qin Yu's fist smashed downwards. That was an ordinary fist. However, it carried with it an endless amount of pressure. It was like a mountain smashing down from above. Even Zhou Tong, who was below, felt his heart trembling. Block! A bitter smile appeared on Zhou Tong's face. He chose to teleport away to dodge the attack. The Thunder Martial God King Zhou Tong was famous for his bravery. He loved to meet force with force. His physical defense was also very high. However, when encountering Qin Yu's clone that was formed from a first-rate Grandma's spiritual treasure, the defense that he was so proud of, when compared to Qin Yu, was akin to an infant's skin, akin to a sheet of iron. They were simply not on the same level. Zhou Tong, it would appear that you only know how to escape. The cyan-robed Qin Yu stopped moving, and did not continue to attack. Zhou Tong also stopped moving. He was happy that Qin Yu did not attack. However, after hearing what Qin Yu said, he coldly snorted and said, "Qin Yu, we are not sparring. Instead, this is a life and death battle. I admit that my defense is inferior to yours. However, could it be that I am going to be killed by you because of that? If you don't have the ability to kill me, then don't make sarcastic remarks here." "Oh, you're in the right now," the cyan-robed Qin Yu said with a light smile. Zhou Tong's old face turned red with anger. In the divine realm, it was extremely difficult for a god king to kill another god king, because god kings were capable of teleportation, unless they encountered a sage emperor, because sage emperors were capable of freezing space, making their opponents unable to teleport. Of course, the Azura God King was also capable of easily killing other God Kings. However, there were only 8 sage emperors. As for those who had comprehended time stop, they were pitifully few. Thus, under normal circumstances, if a God King were to face off against another God King, if that God King were to constantly teleport to escape and continue to tangle with his opponent, that would be considered as shameless behavior. Because he was no match for his opponent, if he continued to tangle with his opponent, that would indeed be somewhat shameless. Zhou Tong's heart was filled with anger. He had a mission, and that was to tangle with Qin Yu's clone. Thus, even though he was no match for Qin Yu's clone, he still continued to tangle with his opponent. He himself was also helpless. After all, of the 4 great god kings, Zhou Wulian and him were tangling with Qin Yu's original body and clone. Zhou Hua was attacking the vast territory. As for Zhou Ran, who knew nothing about the laws of time, was unable to tangle with Qin Yu's clone, who was capable of accelerating time. Most likely, before he could even react, he would be beaten half to death by a single punch. "Amen. It's about to break open," the azure-robed Qin Yu said in a low voice. Qin Yu's original body and his clone were actually one. The clone's soul was formed from a portion of Qin Yu's consciousness and his soul. The azure-robed Qin Yu was also able to sense the spatial energy of the new cosmos. At this moment, he could clearly sense that the vast territory was about to collapse. Buzz! The space trembled. One bamboo after another began to explode into powder. Seeing this scene, Zhou Tong couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. Zhou Tong, before you leave, I'll give you a present. The azure-robed Qinyu said calmly. What? Zhou Tong looked at the azure-robed Qinyu in front of him. Suddenly his face changed. This was because the azure-robed Qinyu had transformed into a streak of azure gas. Furthermore, this streak of gas was spreading out. The portion of the azure gas that was close to Zhou Tong suddenly transformed into a leg that kicked out fiercely. Zhou Tong teleported to dodge. But that leg once again transformed into an azure gas. Zhou Tong had the feeling that in just a few breaths of time, this space would completely collapse. Thus, at this moment, he was completely on guard against this azure gas that was like flowing water. Bang! Another portion of the azure gas that was close to Zhou Tong transformed into a fist that smashed towards him. Zhou Tong teleported once again. Bang! Zhou Tong felt his entire body tighten, and then his soul felt a wave of pain. Not good. Zhou Tong teleported away. At this moment, the vast territory space finally collapsed completely. Zhou Wulian, who had been restricting Qinyu this entire time, teleported out as well. In the sky outside of the fog city, Qinyu, Jiangli, Godking Yifeng, and Zhuo Qilin were standing in midair. As for Zhou Hua and the other 3 god kings from the Thunder Punishment City, their complexions were not very good. Second brother, how is it? Zhou Hua looked to the pale-faced god king Zhou Tong beside him. Zhou Tong's complexion was pale. He appeared to be in a weak state. It's nothing. I merely didn't notice it. Never would I have imagined that Qinyu's clone was not only capable of transforming into streams of air, it was also capable of transforming into other weapons. Big brother. Zhou Wulian took a glance at Zhou Hua and lightly shook his head. Zhou Hua understood the meaning behind his third brother's words. Evidently, the fog city was too powerful. The 4 of them would likely not even be able to destroy the fog city. After taking a glance at the 4 great god kings of the fog city standing side by side, Zhou Hua was about to send a divine awareness voice transmission to have everyone leave together. It would appear that he would have to have the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial take action. Everyone from the Thunder Punishment City, today, you all wish to destroy my fog city and kill the people of my fog city. Naturally, I will return the favor, Qinyu suddenly said with a smile. Zhou Hua and the others all sneered in their hearts. They were all anticipating the scene of their father's arrival when they returned. However, what Qinyu did next shocked them. With a smile on his face, Qinyu pointed with his finger. Space freeze. In an instant, with the fog city as the center, the space within a circumference of 10,000 miles was completely frozen. Unable to teleport, the expressions of Zhou Hua and the others immediately froze. A trace of fierceness emerged from Qinyu's heart. It is time to settle this. Chapter 641. This is impossible. Zhou Hua's complexion immediately turned pale. At this moment, the space that had been frozen without the slightest bit of fluctuation had already clearly told him that this was the truth. Merely, he was still unable to accept it. Even someone as calm as Zhou Wulian had astonishment in his eyes. Father, this is spatial freezing? Zhou Ran stood beside Zhou Wulian and was completely stunned. This Qinyu. Zhuo Qilin looked at Qinyu and was momentarily speechless. When Qinyu used this technique, other than Jiang Li who already knew about it, the others present were all stunned. Spatial freezing. Amongst the god kings, only the sage emperors were capable of using spatial freezing. The reason why the sage emperors had such revered statuses was because of the spatial freezing, a divine ability that caused the other god kings to feel fear. For countless years, the sage emperors were able to use their clan protection spiritual treasures to indirectly freeze space. It was also because of this technique that they could be considered as the peak experts amongst the god kings. This spatial freezing divine ability was something that even someone as powerful as the Azura God King was unable to use. Practically all of the God Kings were certain that only the 8 great sage emperors were capable of using spatial freezing. However, at this moment, the spatial freezing divine ability had actually appeared on Qinyu's body. Are you all prepared? A trace of a cruel smile appeared on Qin Yu's face. He grabbed with one hand, and the divine spear waning snow appeared in his hand. Zhou Hua's complexion was as gloomy as the water in a cold pond. He looked at Qin Yu with a cold gaze, and said with a sneer, "Qin Yu, you are indeed a creator of miracles. This spatial freezing merely prevents us from teleporting. Even if we do not teleport, could it be that you possess the strength to kill us? Without teleportation, you can only rely on speed and attacks. For Qin Yu to kill the 4 great god kings, it would not be a simple matter." Furthermore, Zhou Hua spread out his divine consciousness. In merely a short moment, he had reached the Thunder Punishment City. Zhou Hua's divine consciousness directly entered the residence of his father, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Sometimes the ending can be very unexpected. Zhou Hua had a faint smile on his face. Zhou Hua, Zhou Ran, Zhou Tong, and the others recovered from their initial shock at Qin Yu's spatial freezing. Behind the Thunder Punishment City's 4 great divine kings was an Empyrean, the Thunder Punishment Empyrean. When an Empyrean took action, even the Azura God King would instantly turn into ashes. How arrogant! "Qin Yu, let me deal with this Northwest Sage Emperor." A hoarse voice rang out as Zhuqiulin flew over. Qin Yu extended his hand to stop Zhuqiulin. He smiled and said, "Senior Zhuqiulin, leave the 4 of them to me." Arrogant, Zhou Hua and Zhou Tong shouted at the same time. Zhou Ran and Zhou Wulian couldn't help but sneer. Freezing space only prevented people from teleporting. Flying was still possible, but killing 4 people by himself was simply a dream. Within a secluded courtyard in the Thunder Punishment City, a purple-robed silver-haired old man had a cold expression on his face. His hands were clasped behind his back as he looked towards the east. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate through space. Spatial freezing? This Qin Yu is truly extraordinary. The Thunder Punishment Empyrean raised his eyebrows and said with a low voice. The scarlet-red mole between his eyebrows started to shine. After a moment of silence, the Thunder Punishment Empyrean said with a soft voice, "Gina, the 4 of you, quickly leave the spatial freezing region." In a short moment, the area of 100,000 miles around the Fog City will become the history of the Divine Realm. The Thunder Punishment Empyrean's voice strangely sounded in the ears of Zhou Hua, Zhou Ran, Zhou Tong and Zhou Wulian. At the same time, only the 4 of them were able to hear his voice. Qin Yu and the others were unable to hear his voice. Amen. Something seemed to have happened. Qin Yu's heart tightened. Something seemed to have happened earlier. However, Qin Yu was unable to figure out what it was. At this moment, Qin Yu still didn't know that this was a remarkable ability created by the combination of the spatial laws and the temporal laws. "Second brother, third brother, Ranner, let us leave first." A joyous expression appeared in Zhou Hua's eyes. Look at how Qin Yu is going to die. Zhou Tong's resentment toward Qin Yu was no lower than anyone else's. They all understood what the Thunder Punishment Empyrean had said earlier. It was clear that their father had decided to turn the area of 100,000 miles around the Fog City into dust. With a flip of the hand, heaven and earth would collapse. This was the strength of an exalted celestial. Before an exalted celestial, God Kings were merely toddlers. The Thunder Punishment Empyrean said that he would act and completely destroy this area of 100,000 miles. He would definitely not go back on his word. "Let's go." Zhou Hua, Zhou Wulian, Zhou Tong and Zhou Ran turned into 4 rays of light and flew toward the west. "Qin Yu, you want to kill us? Haha, in your dreams." Zhou Tong's angry laughter resounded through the entire region. Immediately after, little Yu. Jiang Lan also flew out from the Fog City and said, "Quickly chase after them." Jiang Lan himself was about to set off. As for Qin Yu, he smiled to Jiang Lan. "Uncle Lan, do not worry." "Don't worry? Could it be that your flying speed is much faster than theirs? They will soon fly out of the 10,000 miles region." Jiang Lan was a bit impatient. Qin Yu took a glance at the 4 people in the distance, who were about to disappear from his field of vision. "Freeze!" Qin Yu said in a low voice. Just like that, Zhou Tong, Zhou Ran, Zhou Hua and Zhou Wulian were all frozen in the air. They were unable to move at all. This sort of situation had shocked Zhuqiulin, Yifeng and Jiang Lan. "This time stop." Jiang Lan, and then looked to Qinyu. This scene was extremely similar to Time Stop. Time Stop was also where no one was able to move. Uncle Lon, could it be that you all have forgotten that this spatial freeze merely freezes the divine realm's spatial energy? Right after Qinyu finished saying those words, he directly teleported and disappeared before Jianglan and them. Jianglan, Zhuqiulin and Yifeng realized what had happened. Using space to attack, the power was very strong. Merely, all God Kings knew how to teleport. Thus this attack was useless. And now, Qinyu had used spatial freeze. The God Kings were unable to teleport. Spatial freeze froze the divine realm's spatial energy. However, the new cosmos spatial energy was not affected. Qinyu was also able to use the new cosmos spatial energy to suppress the 4 great God Kings. Although the strength of these 4 great God Kings was pretty good. However, when they were unable to teleport, when faced with the boundless spatial energy, it was also very difficult for them to resist. Not good. In the Thunder Punishment City, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's expression changed. Although he was also unable to understand why Qinyu was still able to teleport in that sort of situation. Merely he knew that, if he still did not act, then his children would all die. Humph, who cares what sort of genius you are? Go and die. The red mole between the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's brows grew even redder. He struck out with his palm and said in a low voice, "Single aura 8 elements. Single aura 8 elements." When the 6 great sage emperors joined hands to fight against Qinyu, their strongest attack was only the single aura 6 elements. Even when the 8 great sage emperors joined hands, their strongest attack was only the single aura 8 elements. However, as an exalted celestial, he was actually able to easily use the single aura 8 elements. When the 6 great sage emperors had simultaneously frozen space, they had all trembled under the attack of the single aura 6 elements. This single aura 8 elements, according to the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's thoughts, breaking through the frozen space and killing Qinyu should be extremely easy. With the teleportation, Qinyu appeared before the 4 great God Kings of the Thunder Punishment City. "You Qinyu, how are you still able to use the spatial energy?" Zhou spoke with a stern voice in disbelief. Shock, anger, helplessness and hatred were present in the eyes of the other 3 God Kings. The 4 of them who were being suppressed by the spatial energy all knew that this was not time stop. This was spatial energy suppression. However, the space had clearly been frozen. Thus, how was this Qinyu able to use the spatial energy? This was truly contradictory. Don't think about it. You all won't be able to figure it out. I'll send you all on your way. From today onwards, the Thunder Punishment City no longer has a God King. The divine spear waning snow in Qinyu's hand pierced towards Zhou Tong, the one who had the most hatred. It was an ordinary spear. Its speed was also not fast. If it was in the past, Zhou Tong would have countless methods to dodge it. However, at this moment Zhou Tong, who was being suppressed by the spatial energy and unable to move, could only look on helplessly as the spear pierced towards him. Bang! A loud explosion was heard. Frightening energy fluctuations were actually being emitted from the enormous fog city in the distance. As for the fog city, it was instantly turned into ruins. Boundless origin energy began to spread in all directions. That surging origin energy was something that Qinyu was able to clearly sense. Even the frozen space started to tremble. Amen. The spear in Qinyu's hand was still piercing forth. At the same time, his expression changed slightly. Immediately, he manipulated the spatial energy to suppress the incoming attack. An attack from the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial? What powerful might! He should be trying to destroy the fog city and my spatial freeze. However, he has miscalculated. Chi! The sound of the spear piercing through flesh and bone was extremely clear. The long spear directly pierced into Zhou Tong's chest, and countless streams of strength chi burst out from the tip of the spear. They followed the body cavity and directly rushed into his mind, directly shattering his soul and nascent soul. Similarly, his true spirit was also shattered to the point where it could not be any more shattered. Second brother, second uncle, Zhou Hua. Zhou Wulian and Zhou Ran all cried out in pain. Qin Yu, our Thunder Punishment City is irreconcilable with you. Zhou Hua appeared to have gone mad. Could it be that our relationship was good in the past? Qin Yu said with a light smile on his face. Zhou Hua and the others were immediately speechless. Father! Zhou Hua cried out in pain in his heart. Why had his father, an exalted celestial, not come to kill Qin Yu and save them? Holding the divine spear Waning Snow, Qin Yu flew over to Zhou Wulian's side. With a smile on his face he said, Are you all confused as to why the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial did not save you all? Unfortunately, I will not tell you all. Qin Yu thrust forth his spear again. Impossible. Even if the 7 sage emperors were to join hands to freeze space, they would not be able to stop the single aura 8 elements. Only when the 8 sage emperors join hands and gather the 8 great origin powers to freeze space would the degree of spatial freezing reach its maximum. Could it be that this Qin Yu is capable of controlling the 8 great origin powers? The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had miscalculated. The attack that he had thought to be a sure victory was actually unable to break through Qin Yu's spatial freezing. Tong Father will avenge you. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's miscalculation had caused him to lose a son. And this time, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had taken out his strongest weapon, the Exalted Celestial's spirit treasure, the Origin Sin Sword. An enormous sword the size of a palm appeared in the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's hand. A frightening fluctuation was emitted from it. With a wave of the enormous sword, the space merely trembled slightly. Then there was no movement. Faced with the incoming spear thrust by Qin Yu, Zhou Wulian actually had a smile of relief on his face. If I'm going to die, then so be it. There is no need for me to suffer like this. Merely, I will never be able to wait until the day when the candle burns out. Puchi, Peng. Zhou Wulian's entire body emitted a terrifying fluctuation. Self-detonation. A God King's self-detonation. Qin Yu's own defense was far inferior to his avatar's. He didn't dare to be so close to a God King's self-detonation attack. Qin Yu immediately teleported away. Not good. Qin Yu's face suddenly changed. Qi. Like a knife cutting through paper, a translucent sword energy actually sliced through the spatial freezing at an extremely fast speed. The spatial freezing began to collapse. What a terrifying attack. Qin Yu was stunned. His soul had fused with the 8 great origin powers. The stability of the spatial freezing had already reached an extremely high level. But his opponent's attack had actually reached such a level. Moreover, this sword energy was slicing towards Qin Yu. As it sliced through the spatial freezing, the sword energy was constantly weakening. Disperse. Qin Yu didn't retreat. Instead, he continued to incite his new cosmos's spatial energy to block this sword energy. During the process of blocking, the sword energy was also constantly weakening. After slicing through the spatial freezing and exhausting a large amount of Qin Yu's spatial energy, the sword energy finally collapsed. Qin Yu was also astonished. The attacking power of this sword energy was actually so terrifying. Qin Yu was certain that the attacking power of this sword energy should be even more terrifying than his divine spear Waning Snow. However, Qin Yu didn't understand. The reason why this attacking power was more terrifying than the divine spear Waning Snow was not only because the weapon was an exalted celestial's spiritual treasure, it was also because the opponent was an exalted celestial. Father! Zhou Ran was in pain. His father, Zhou Wulian, had already self-detonated and died. Let's go. Zhou Hua grabbed him and immediately used teleportation to escape. If they didn't run now, when would they run? This time, the Thunder Punishment City had already lost 2 great God Kings. This was already an unprecedentedly huge loss. Qin Yu would become the nightmare of the Thunder Punishment City. Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, is it? With an intention from Qin Yu, Jiangli Jianglan, Zhua Qiulin, Yifeng and them were all brought back to the new cosmos by Qin Yu. At the very least, I must experience the strength of an exalted celestial. Without any worries, Qin Yu was eager to give it a try. Chapter 642. The floating feathers exalted celestial's ice-cold and emotionless silver eyes took a glance at the thunder punishment exalted celestial. Junior brother, the exalted celestial mountain will descend once every 6 quadrillion years. You should also know how much importance Master places on you. I hope that you will not make Master unhappy. That's right, eldest senior brother. I understand. The thunder punishment exalted celestial said repeatedly. The floating feathers exalted celestial turned his back to the thunder punishment exalted celestial and said indifferently, "It's good that you understand. Back then, Master chose you and you were fortunate enough to become an exalted celestial. You should have the awareness of an exalted celestial. It doesn't matter if those 2 sons of yours have died. As far as I know, in the countless years that you and third junior brother have hidden your identities and traveled in the lower realms, you've both left behind many descendants. The death of 1 or 2 can be considered nothing. Eldest senior brother is right." The thunder punishment exalted celestial said. The 3 great exalted celestials rarely stayed in the divine realm. Most of the time, they would hide their identities in the boundless lower realms and live brand new lives. Naturally, they would also leave behind descendants. Take care of yourself. The floating feathers exalted celestial said. Then, he disappeared before the thunder punishment exalted celestial. The thunder punishment exalted celestial stood there respectfully. After the floating feathers exalted celestial left, he straightened his back and sighed. While it is true that I have many sons, the one who died this time around is my most beloved you. When Zhou Tong died, the thunder punishment exalted celestial's heart was not shaken at all. He merely felt that his dignity had been violated and felt a bit of anger. However, when Zhou Wulian died, the thunder punishment exalted celestial felt his vision darken. He nearly went crazy. Revenge? The thunder punishment exalted celestial started to frown. The red mole between his brows started to tremble. He truly wanted to take revenge. However, upon thinking of the floating feathers exalted celestial's threat, if you are to attack Qin Yu right now, you will be violating the rules. In that case, I can only represent Master and carry out the rules of the heavens and directly obliterate you. The thunder punishment exalted celestial shivered and immediately gave up on his plan of revenge. In Master's eyes, third junior brother and I might be nothing more than tools. Only eldest senior brother is considered by Master to be his true disciple. Upon thinking of his Master, the thunder punishment exalted celestial felt a chill in his heart. His Master's strength had already reached an extremely terrifying level. The thunder punishment exalted celestial was with heavens. The 2 of them weren't on the same level at all. And the reason why he had become an Empyrean was because he was an Empyrean. He had only been lucky enough to be chosen by that Master and be taught the laws of space and the laws of time. This allowed him to become a celestial venerable in one fell swoop. It could be passed on, but it could also be taken away. Thunder punishment exalted celestial understood how powerful his Master was. His Master was unparalleled. Master leaves everything to eldest senior brother. Over the countless years, the number of times he has summoned me can be counted with one hand. As for eldest senior apprentice brother, Empyrean thunder punishment's heart dimmed. Empyrean flutter feather could go and see his Master at any time. As for Empyrean thunder punishment, he had only been seen several times in the last 120 quadrillion years. And this was because of major events. Furthermore, without his Master's permission, he, the thunder punishment exalted celestial, simply had no idea where to find his Master. The difference in status was obvious at a glance. Furthermore, the floating feathers exalted celestial had the authority to obliterate other exalted celestials. The responsibility of managing the entire universe was on the floating feathers exalted celestial. This was something that Master had said himself. Ever since the day his Master announced the floating feathers exalted celestial's authority, the thunder punishment exalted celestial had never dared to be disrespectful toward the floating feathers exalted celestial. However, Jiner's death must be avenged. Merely, I must endure, wait until a new exalted celestial is born. Then, I will directly kill Qin Yu. The seed of hatred in the thunder punishment exalted celestial's heart took root and began to germinate. Golden light illuminated everything. That trembling sound continued to reverberate through heaven and earth. Countless people in the divine realm raised their heads to look. Above the endless red clouds, an enormous floating mountain was descending at a very slow speed. This mountain was extremely enormous. The entire floating mountain had a very wide base. It had a circumference of close to 1,000,000 miles. Such an enormous floating mountain was something that none of the 8 great sacred grounds of the divine realm could compare to. The enormous floating mountain with a circumference of over 1,000,000 miles was slowly descending from the sky. The entire sky of the divine realm was filled with red clouds. This enormous mountain that was originally above the red clouds was still slowly descending. With its height and the slow speed of its descent, it would likely take several days for it to completely penetrate through the red clouds. The slow descent of such an enormous floating mountain was a scene that caused one's heart to tremble. In the vast sea region of the Eastern Sea, a passageway suddenly appeared on the originally slightly undulating sea surface. The sea water naturally parted, and a figure walked out from the passageway. It was a robust man with long scarlet red hair. He raised his head to look at the sky. Exalted Celestial Mountain. Haha, it's actually the Exalted Celestial Mountain. However, compared to the last time, the color of the Exalted Celestial Mountain this time around has changed. The Exalted Celestial Mountain that was completely blue in the past has actually turned into a completely green Exalted Celestial Mountain. The endless blue clouds of the past have also turned into red clouds. Red, I like it. Looks like I have hope of success this time around. Ever since 6 quadrillion years ago, the Exalted Celestial Mountain had once again appeared. The hidden divine king, who wholeheartedly pursued the pinnacle of cultivation, was about to appear once again. Those who were able to cultivate to the divine king realm all had expectations toward the pinnacle of cultivation. Without that kind of desire and goal toward the pinnacle, it would be very difficult for them to cultivate to the divine king realm. The last time the Exalted Celestial Mountain descended, the 8 great sage emperors did not obtain any benefits. Instead, the unremarkable unfettered divine king obtained the final victory. The unfettered divine king could not be considered as a powerful divine king. It was only because of the assistance of the floating feathers Exalted Celestial that he was able to become an Exalted Celestial. Due to the birth of the unfettered Exalted Celestial, this caused even more divine kings to be filled with anticipation. The descent of the Exalted Celestial Mountain does not mean that whoever is stronger will become the Exalted Celestial. If that is the case, what is the point of fighting over it? Since the unfettered divine king was able to become an Exalted Celestial, I might be able to as well. A figure could be seen flying out from a desolate mountain in the divine realm. After that, he directly teleported and disappeared. Practically all of the divine kings were tempted. With the descent of the Exalted Celestial Mountain, everyone would have a chance. Although strength was important, it did not represent everything. In the sky above the Azure Sea, there were 4 people standing in the sky. 1 person was standing in front, and 3 people were behind him. The person standing in front with his hands behind his back was the white-clothed Azure divine king Luofan. On Luofan's face was an indifferent smile. Merely, his gaze was fixed on the distant Exalted Celestial Mountain. The 3 people behind Luofan were respectively a silver-gowned man, a gray-clothed man, and an ice-cold beauty. These 3 people were precisely the other 3 divine kings of the Azure Sea, God King and Sun, God King Sun Lien, also known as God King Heaven Pacifying, and God King Lu Lien. Everyone, although I am determined to obtain the position of the Exalted Celestial this time around, Little and Sun Lien, Little Lien, you all also have hopes of becoming God Kings. There is no need for you to help me. Luofan said indifferently. The descent of the Exalted Celestial Mountain, the so-called allies and friends of the past, at this moment they were all jokes. Not many people were trustworthy. That was because practically all of the divine kings wanted to become Exalted Celestials. If one wanted to find allies, one must open one's eyes wide open. Else, if one were to be careless, one might be harmed by others. 6 quadrillion years ago, the number of divine kings that died was truly too many. Big brother, you don't have to say any more. And Sun still had a grim expression. This time around, no one will be able to stop you from becoming an exalted celestial. That's right, big brother. Lu Lian beside him also nodded her head and said. That gray-clothed Sun Lian also lightly nodded his head. Luo Fan's eyes shined. He nodded his head and said. Very well. I won't say any words of thanks. Little Lian Sun Lian. When the descent of the exalted celestial mountain stops, we will go there. Yes, big brother. And Ping, Sun Lian and Lu Lian, the three divine kings all nodded their heads. The Azura divine king's personal charm was truly great. Inside the divine realm's fog marsh, the fog city that was destroyed by the thunder punishment exalted celestial, had now risen from the ground. A city that was nearly identical to the original one was located here. To Qinyu, constructing a city was indeed extremely easy. On top of the city walls of the fog city, Qinyu and Jiangli were holding hands as they stood on top of the city walls. They were feeling the gentle wind blowing past them. Qinyu, right now, the status of the fog city could be said to be extremely stable. Now that the descent of the exalted celestial mountain, I will be taking my leave. The exalted celestial is still very attractive to me. Zhuoqiulin's hoarse voice sounded. Qinyu and Jiangli both looked at Zhuoqiulin. Qinyu smiled and said, Senior Zhuoqiulin, you can go ahead. This time around, the descent of the exalted celestial mountain has truly brought a lot of divine kings. Qinyu's new cosmos's spatial energy was very clear about what was happening in the divine realm. Zhuoqiulin's heart relaxed slightly. Although she was not afraid of Qinyu, she had received Qinyu's first-rate grandmist spiritual treasure. If she were to leave without obtaining Qinyu's permission, she would feel somewhat embarrassed in her heart. In that case, farewell. Zhuoqiulin did not say many words of gratitude. She nodded her head slightly and flew out. Then with a teleportation, she disappeared before Qinyu and Jiang Li's eyes. Chapter 643. Brother Yu, do you want to become an exalted celestial? Jiang Li raised her head and looked to Qinyu. In that case, do you? Qinyu looked to Jiang Li with a smile on his face. Jiang Li started to frown. After a moment of silence, she said, a bit. After all, the exalted celestials are the paramount existences in the divine realm. Paramount? Are they truly paramount? Qinyu thought in his heart. The divine realm had already been perfected. In the eyes of countless people, the exalted celestials were paramount existences. However, if the exalted celestials were paramount, then what about the master who created this cosmos? Brother Yu, you still haven't said whether or not you want to become one. Jiang Li asked Qinyu. Qinyu said with a chuckle. Actually, I do not have a great ambition. As long as I possess enough strength to protect the people that I love, the people that I care about, that would be sufficient. And now, I have already reached that requirement. Qinyu had a happy smile on his face. We have taken root in the divine realm. Currently, there is no one in the divine realm that dares to provoke our fog city. The massacre of the Thunder Punishment City has already shocked the others. I have already obtained the effect that I wanted. My loved ones are able to live the life that they want to live. I am able to be together with you without being disturbed by anyone and quietly wait for the birth of our child. I am already very satisfied. Qinyu said slowly. Hearing those words, Jiang Li was moved. She nestled against Qinyu's chest. Qinyu stroked Jiang Li's beautiful hair. He merely smiled quietly and did not say anything else. At this moment, only the sound of the wind could be heard. In these several days, the entire divine realm was illuminated by the golden light the entire time. Regardless of whether it was the light of day or the dark curtain of night, before the illumination of the golden light, they all lost their effect. The floating exalted celestial mountain was still slowly descending. After several days, only the peak of the floating exalted celestial mountain had left the red clouds. Inside the purple mystic mansion, Qinyu Kuro, Jiang Li and Bai Ling were currently sipping tea and chatting. Qinyu, God King Yifeng walked over from the side. At the same time, Jiang Lan also walked over. Qin Yu looked to God King Yifeng and Jiang Lan. Uncle Yifeng, Uncle Lan. Qin Yu hastily stood up. Jiang Li, Kuro and Bai Ling also stood up. God King Yifeng waved his hand and said, "You guys continue. I just want to tell you that the exalted celestial mountain is about to stop descending. I'm going to take a look at the exalted celestial mountain. I no longer have any worries in my heart. Only the exalted celestial mountain can move my heart." Qin Yu nodded slightly. Qin Yu could understand God King Yifeng's thoughts. "Uncle Lan, are you going too?" Qin Yu looked at Uncle Lan. Jiang Lan smiled and nodded. "Little Yu, your strength has already grown to the point where I am completely at ease. In the entire God realm, there aren't many people who are a match for you. Now that the exalted celestial mountain has descended, I'll go take a look as well. I might even be able to meet some old friends that I haven't seen in a long time." Qin Yu nodded slightly. "Little Yu, I know that you might not have much expectation for the exalted celestial mountain. Merely, I suggest that you go and take a look. The exalted celestial mountain is extremely peculiar," Jiang Lan said before leaving. Qin Yu's heart was moved. Exalted celestial mountain? For this exalted celestial mountain to suddenly descend, who was controlling it from behind? Was it the exalted celestials? Qin Yu didn't believe it. After all, the exalted celestial mountain contained the opportunity to become an exalted celestial. Ordinary exalted celestials would likely not be able to create the exalted celestial mountain. Could it be? Could it be the master of this divine realm cosmos? Qin Yu's heart was moved. "Little Yu will be setting off first." Jiang Lan and Yifeng lightly smiled to Qin Yu and them. After that they floated away. When Jiang Lan left, Qin Yu was still immersed in his own thoughts. If this exalted celestial mountain was created by the master of this divine realm cosmos, then it was necessary for him to go and take a look. It's not bad to take a look. At this moment, Qin Yu had already changed his decision. "Li Er, after the tea tasting is over, shall we also go and take a look at the exalted celestial mountain?" Qin Yu suggested to Jiang Li. Upon hearing that, Jiang Li was shocked. "Brother Yu, why did you change your decision? Exalted celestial mountain?" Kuro and Bai Ling's eyes shined. Kuro immediately said, "Big brother, exactly what sort of mountain is this exalted celestial mountain? Can I also go and take a look?" Qin Yu shook his head and said, "Xiao Hei, I am also uncertain as to exactly what sort of mountain this exalted celestial mountain is. As for the exalted celestial mountain, I know very little about it. Back then, I did not plan to go there. Thus, I did not ask Uncle Lan and them about it. However, I know one thing. Only God Kings can enter the exalted celestial mountain. Others are not allowed to enter it. Also, there are already quite a number of God Kings gathered around the exalted celestial mountain. Xiao Hei, although your strength is not bad, it will still be very dangerous for you to go there. Thus, it's best that you don't go. If you really want to take a look at the exalted celestial mountain, you can just look at it from afar. Don't go near the God Kings around the exalted celestial mountain," Qin Yu advised. Kuro nodded his head slightly. Kuro had already comprehended time acceleration. Furthermore, he had the flowing light spear that Qin Yu had refined for him. Its might was comparable to the 8 great sage emperors' clan protection spiritual treasures. In terms of attack power, he was stronger than ordinary God Kings. It's just that Kuro was unable to teleport. This also caused him to be at a disadvantage when facing God Kings. However, Kuro himself was not in a hurry. That was because he knew that his cultivation speed was already very fast. Moreover, the current Qin Yu was able to intimidate all parties in the divine realm by himself. Just like the Azura God King, spatial freezing, and new cosmos spatial energy. The combination of the two was definitely not weaker than time stop. In the past, the Azura God King caused the 8 great sage emperors to feel apprehensive. And now, there was one more God King that caused the 8 great sage emperors to feel apprehensive. It was the rapidly rising Qin Yu. A gentle breeze blew. Qin Yu and Jiang Li's robes fluttered in the wind. They streaked across the sky and floated forward in the sky above the Azura Sea. Right below the exalted celestial mountain was the Azura Sea. However, the Azura Sea was much larger than the exalted celestial mountain. If the exalted celestial mountain were to descend to the surface of the sea, it would roughly be at the western part of the Azure Sea. The hovering fiery red exalted celestial mountain was currently about 10,000 meters away from the surface of the sea. The entire exalted celestial mountain was emitting a conspicuous scarlet radiance. If one were to look carefully, one would be able to faintly see that behind the scarlet radiance, there were cyan, green, and other colors. At this moment, there were over 40 god kings gathered around the exalted celestial mountain. The god kings here were from the 8 great divine families, ascender powers, and hidden sections. So many divine kings gathered here for the sake of the Empyrean mountain. However, it was very strange as well. Over 40 god kings were actually gathered in a region that was relatively close to each other. There are actually so many hidden god kings. Their hidden strength is truly abundant. If the number of hidden divine kings was added to the number of divine kings from the 3 major powers who had ascended, they are already capable of being compared to our 8 great divine families. The utmost West Sage Emperor Shintuyen said with a low laugh. Beside him was the utmost South Sage Emperor Duanmuyin. Duanmuyin also nodded and said, "The potential of ascenders is simply too great. They have a large population and are spread across various realms. No matter how low the probability of a genius appearing is, with a large population, there will still be geniuses appearing. The more time passed, the more god kings would ascend. The thinner our bloodline, the weaker our talent." Speaking of geniuses, that Qin Yu is really... Shintuyen sighed and said no more. Back then, the battle between Qin Yu and the people from the Thunder Punishment City had truly caused too great of a commotion. The other god kings were naturally able to sense it. The great majority of god kings had used their divine awareness to observe the battle. Qin Yu was actually able to use spatial freezing and easily make the 4 great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City unable to move. Furthermore, he was able to kill 2 god kings in succession. If it wasn't for a super expert secretly helping him, the 4 great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City would likely have all been killed. Too powerful. Qin Yu's strength caused the hearts of all the spectators to tremble. Spatial freezing was already enough to cause one's heart to tremble. However, Qin Yu was also able to use something similar to time stop to freeze his opponent's body. The other god kings were unable to discover the existence of the new cosmos spatial energy. With the combination of the two, Qin Yu was able to easily kill god kings. Just like the Azura god king, the new Azura god king, another existence that surpassed the 8 great sage emperors. Brother Shintu, what do you think? Duanmuyin suddenly looked to the east. He saw a pair of young man and woman flying toward them with smiles on their faces. Qin Yu and Jiangli. Shintuyen also felt his heart jump. The current Qin Yu even dared to massacre the people of the Thunder Punishment City that had the backing of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Who would he not dare to kill? With that Qin Yu's temperament, my son has told me about it before. They shouldn't hold much hostility toward us. Let's go over. Shintuyen said to Duanmuyin. Duanmuyin nodded. Qin Yu held Jiangli's hand and approached the Exalted Celestial Mountain. The closer they got to the Exalted Celestial Mountain, the more intense the oppressive aura being emitted by the Exalted Celestial Mountain. When Qin Yu saw the layer of scarlet radiance circulating on the surface of the Exalted Celestial Mountain, his expression changed. What a terrifying Exalted Celestial Mountain! Qin Yu was able to clearly distinguish that there was a layer of scarlet red membrane, several tens of meters away from the surface of the Exalted Celestial Mountain. This layer of scarlet membrane completely enveloped the entire Exalted Celestial Mountain. At first glance, one would think that this Exalted Celestial Mountain was scarlet red in color. I am Fa Lan of the Eastern Sea. I pay my respects to God King Qin Yu and God King Jiangli. A blue-haired middle-aged man said to Qin Yu and Jiangli enthusiastically and respectfully. I am Ma Tian of the Western Sea. When I was in the Western Sea, I had heard of the great names of God King Qin Yu and God King Jiangli many times. Merely, this is the first time I have the opportunity to meet the God King couple. An old man with a smile on his face also bowed and said, I wonder if God King Qinyu still remembers me? A clear voice sounded. The 100 Flowers God King, Huang Fuliuxiang, also flew over one after another. God Kings came over to greet Qinyu enthusiastically. Regardless of whether it was the God Kings of the 8 great divine families, or the hidden God Kings, they were all extremely enthusiastic toward Qinyu. Furthermore, the majority of the God Kings had a trace of modesty in their eyes. Even the utmost West Sage Emperor, the Southwest Sage Emperor, and the others in the past would consider every word that they said to Qinyu. They were afraid that a single unintentional word would ruin their relationship. Yet, the numerous God Kings were treating Qinyu with such enthusiasm. Such treatment was something that even the 8 great sage emperors did not enjoy. Before this, only the Azura God King was similarly welcomed by nearly all of the God Kings. After the God Kings left, Zhongli smiled at Qinyu and said in a low voice, "Brother Yu, they all seem to be afraid of you. Not only me, I'm afraid that the Azura God King is also the same. These God Kings have come here for the sake of fighting over that bit of opportunity. They are worried that they will offend me and cause me to act ruthlessly toward them." Qinyu was able to guess what those people were thinking. Ordinarily, the hidden God Kings would not care about anyone. However, now that they had come out, they would naturally want to establish a good relationship with the Azura God King and Qinyu, 2 super experts that could easily kill them. Qinyu. A familiar voice sounded. Qinyu turned around to look. The Azura God King Luo Fan was currently flying over with the other 3 God Kings of the Azura Sea. "Originally, I had wanted to help you. Haha. It would appear now that your strength is about the same as mine. You have truly hidden yourself well," Luo Fan said with a smile. At the same time, Zhuo Qiulin, Jiang Lan and Yifeng flew over from afar. Azura God King. The 3 of them merely nodded to the Azura God King Luo Fan. After that they looked to Qinyu. They were also happy that Qinyu had arrived. "Uncle Lan, what is going on with this exalted celestial mountain? What is that red membrane on the surface? I feel that the energy aura is extremely frightening. The entire mountain has been covered by it. In that case, how do we enter it?" After some small talk, Qinyu directly asked. "It's better for me to explain," the Azura God King Luo Fan said with a light smile. "It would appear that the structure of the exalted celestial mountain, this time, is very similar to the structure of the exalted celestial mountain last time. This red membrane is what we called the God King's Cage from back then." God King's Cage. This name caused Qinyu's heart to skip a beat. I will tell you about the characteristics of this God King's Cage later. As for how to enter it, although the exalted celestial mountain is currently covered by the God King's Cage, once the exalted celestial mountain stops descending, a very special tunnel will appear. The Relief Sculpture Tunnel. The Azura God King said with a smile on his face. Relief Sculpture Tunnel? Qinyu's spatial energy immediately covered the entire exalted celestial mountain. Several tens of meters around the surface of the exalted celestial mountain was covered by the red membrane. Where was the Relief Sculpture Tunnel? Chapter 644. Azura God King. What is this Relief Sculpture Tunnel? Qinyu inquired. The Azura God King looked to Jiang Lan beside him with a smile. Jiang Lan, tell Qinyu about it in detail. Jiang Lan smiled and nodded. He then looked to Qinyu and said, Little Yu, last time when the exalted celestial mountain descended, the tunnel that allowed us to enter the exalted celestial mountain was the Relief Sculpture Tunnel. Whether or not it is the Relief Sculpture Passage this time is still uncertain. I will first tell you about the Relief Sculpture Passage that appeared the last time the exalted celestial mountain descended. This Relief Sculpture Tunnel will appear at the foot of the Empyrean Mountain. Once God Kings stepped inside, they would not be able to fly, let alone teleport. In the Relief Sculpture Tunnel, one could only rely on their legs to walk. After exiting the Relief Sculpture Tunnel, they officially entered the exalted celestial mountain. Only then can one fly, teleport, and so on. Jiang Lan briefly explained. There was no need to know too much about what the Relief Sculpture Passage was. It was enough for him to know that he would not be able to fly or teleport once he entered. Unable to fly or teleport, Qin Yu pondered in his heart. To prevent a god king from teleporting, all he needed to do was freeze space. But to make it so that god kings were unable to fly, that was terrifying. It could allow a god king to walk normally, but it could not fly. What kind of divine ability was this? At least, Qin Yu couldn't do it. Qin Yu, I'm going to greet an old friend first. Please excuse me. The Azura God King Luofan's voice caused Qin Yu to stop pondering. Qin Yu immediately smiled and nodded. Azura God King, there's no need to worry about me. After that, Qin Yu stayed together with Jiangli, Jianglan, Zuoqiulin and Yifeng. The crimson-red exalted celestial mountain was still descending slowly. Brother Yu, how many god kings do you think have yet to arrive? Jiangli asked with a smile. There were a total of 44 god kings here. From Jiangli's point of view, almost all the god kings in the god world were here. Those who didn't arrive could be counted on one hand. Qin Yu's gaze swept the surroundings. There are 3 god kings who didn't come, including the one from the West Sea Blood Sea. Qin Yu said with a faint smile. Of course, if there are people who can avoid my detection, then there would be more than 3. If there is such a person, that person is probably at the same level as the Blood Sea's God King. Before the 4 great God Kings from the Thunder Punishment City charged toward the Fog City, the total number of God Kings in the Divine Realm was 49. It was just that in the recent battle, Zhou Wulian and Zhou Tong had died. The number of God Kings in the Divine World had dropped to 47. While Qin Yu and Jiangli were talking, the base of the floating exalted celestial mountain finally descended to the surface of the Azura Sea. When the entire base touched the surface of the Azura Sea, it completely stopped descending. Clang! The sound of metal clashing suddenly spread from the base of the exalted celestial mountain and spread in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it resounded throughout the entire god realm. All the god kings in the surroundings of the exalted celestial mountain were shocked when they heard the voice. Afterwards, all of them roused from their stupor and flew towards the source of the voice. This voice? Qin Yu was a bit confused. Beside him, Jiangli was also confused. The relief sculpture tunnel has opened. Jianglan said with a smile. Little Yu, do not worry. There is no danger right now. Just go in. Even if there is danger, I reckon that not many people would be able to injure you. After that, Jianglan, Zuoqiulin, and Yifeng all flew toward the foot of the exalted celestial mountain with smiles on their faces. Qin Yu's new cosmospatial energy had covered the entire exalted celestial mountain. He instantly discovered the change to the exalted celestial mountain. The surface of the Azura Sea below the exalted celestial mountain had completely calmed down. It was so calm that it was like a mirror. There was not the slightest fluctuation. As for the foot of the exalted celestial mountain, there was actually an entrance tunnel that was emitting an endless amount of black light. The only tunnel that appeared ought to be the relief sculpture tunnel that the Azura God King, Jianglan and them spoke of. What a sharp aura! When Qin Yu's new cosmospatial energy came into contact with the entrance of the tunnel that was emitting a black light, he was able to sense the oppression that this tunnel gave him. It was so much so that he even felt that his new cosmospatial energy was being suppressed. Li Air, let's go and check it out. Qin Yu looked to Jiangli. Jiangli nodded with a smile on her face. The two of them immediately flew over side by side. At the foot of the exalted celestial mountain, the tunnel that was emitting a black light was only a foot away from the surface of the water. At this moment, there were god kings entering the tunnel one after another. Many of the god kings had indifferent expressions. However, their gazes were filled with caution. When they saw Qin Yu and his wife flying over, a group of god kings that were preparing to enter the tunnel immediately moved aside. God King Qin Yu, please go ahead. The god king of the utmost southern region's Lightland City, Duanmulu, said with a smile. Qin Yu did not try to decline. That was because he knew that it would be useless even if he were to decline. Thus, he lightly smiled to the surrounding god kings, and then entered the blacklight tunnel, while holding Li Air's hand. After stepping into the tunnel, Qin Yu's heart completely calmed down. So this is the relief sculpture tunnel. Qin Yu had a hint of a smile on his face. Jiangli held Qin Yu's hand. and carefully inspected the relief sculpture tunnel, as though they were sightseeing. The relief sculpture passageway was a straight passageway. This tunnel was only wide enough for 2 or 3 people to walk side by side. This tunnel was completely constructed from a type of black ore. At the same time, on the walls on both sides, there were many relief sculptures. The skill of these sculptures is truly clumsy. Qingyu looked for a long time. He couldn't help but lower his head and sigh. Although the relief sculptures at the end of the tunnel are much better than the ones at the front, but they are still clumsy. The first stage of artifact forging, the artifact embryo, was the forging of the artifact embryo. The forging of the artifact embryo involved drawing, carving, etc. Qingyu naturally had the right to comment on this. I think it's all right. Jiangli laughed. The relief sculptures in this tunnel are all better than the last. They are constantly improving. I think that when we reach the end, the relief sculptures there should give me a pleasant surprise. Qingyu laughed. He was truly curious in his heart. Who was it that placed these relief sculptures here? These sculptures weren't even able to completely fuse the Tao of nature into them. To even take out such works, was it a disgrace? From what I've heard from the Azura God King and Uncle Lon, this relief sculpture tunnel appeared the last time the exalted celestial mountain descended. Could it be that the master of this universe, the deity realm, deliberately took it out for everyone to see? Qingyu became curious. What did these relief sculptures mean? As they continued forward, Qingyu became more and more surprised. Because the deeper they went, the higher the level of skill of the relief sculptures on the walls. When they reached the end of the relief sculpture tunnel, the final relief sculpture caused even Qinyu's heart to palpitate. The final relief sculpture was of a sword. Sword energy crisscrossed, tearing apart the sky. It was invincible. What an astonishing sword intent. Looking at the final relief sculpture, Qinyu's heart actually resonated with it. He had a very wonderful feeling. It was the same feeling he had when the universal world shattered, and the universe was first formed. It was extremely peculiar. Qingyu involuntarily stopped his footsteps. His gaze was fixed on the final relief sculpture. The God Kings behind him walked past one after another. Only Qingyu continued to stand there. Jiang Li, who was beside him, was also somewhat puzzled as to why Qingyu would care so much about the final relief sculpture. After a long while, Jiang Li finally spoke. Brother Yu, we have reached the end of the relief sculpture tunnel. Let's go out. Oh. Qingyu woke up with a start. Okay, let's go out. Qingyu pulled Jiang Li's hand and walked out of the relief sculpture tunnel. After exiting the relief sculpture tunnel, the scene before their eyes changed. When they were outside, the entire exalted celestial mountain seemed to be scarlet red. In fact, the scarlet red light was merely that membrane. The true exalted celestial mountain was mainly composed of blue stones and yellow stones. In this place, there were jagged rocks of strange shapes. Occasionally, there would even be spring water dripping down from the rocks. There were also thick layers of green moss on the ground. This meant that this exalted celestial mountain possessed a long history. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. In the surrounding air of the exalted celestial mountain, numerous figures soared into the sky in succession. The majority of the God Kings had soared into the sky. Merely, no matter how they flew, they were unable to pass through that red membrane, the God King's cage. Little Yu, Jiang Lan flew over. Uncle Lan. Qingyu and Jiang Li walked over to welcome him. Jiang Lan said with a smile. How is it? What do you think of this exalted celestial mountain? It's all right. That relief sculpture tunnel still gave me the deepest impression. Qingyu involuntarily recalled those relief sculptures. Qingyu suddenly had a guess. Those relief sculptures ought to be the work of an expert who gradually created them during his growth. That final relief sculpture must be the work of the expert. Deepest impression? Jiang Lan was a bit surprised. Uncle Lan, could it be that you didn't sense the extraordinariness of the final relief sculpture? Qingyu said with a smile. Jiang Lan said with a light smile. The final relief sculpture contained the sword intent of the sword path within it. What's so different about it? No, it's different. Qingyu shook his head. I was able to sense that relief sculpture contained a very special Tao. Merely my cultivation path is different from it. Thus, I am unable to sense it completely. However, merely the harmony between our minds was already sufficient to shock me. Really? Jiang Lan was surprised. In all these years, he had never discovered anything special about the decorative relief sculptures of the relief sculpture passageway. Qin Yu had just answered. However, right at this moment, a misty cyan light shot down from a mountain peak, over 1,000,000 miles away from the foot of the exalted celestial mountain. The boundless cyan light had actually turned the entire exalted celestial mountain into a faint cyan color. It appeared. This quickly, Jiang Lan had a pleasantly surprised expression. Chapter 645. Qin Yu tried to extend his new cosmos's spatial energy. However, to Qin Yu's shock, when his new cosmos's spatial energy reached the source of the cyan light, it was actually unable to approach it. Forbidden. This was the first time that Qin Yu discovered that there was actually someone capable of forbidding the extension of his new cosmos's spatial energy. Appeared? Uncle Lan, what appeared? Qin Yu could only ask Jiang Lan. Jiang Lan looked to Qin Yu and said with a mocking smile, "Little Yu, did you try to use your divine awareness to discover the source of that cyan light only to discover that your divine awareness is unable to approach it?" Hearing those words, Qin Yu came to understand a lot. That cyan light seemed to be able to isolate a lot of energies. It simply did not allow other energies to approach it. Regardless of whether it was spatial energy or soul energy, it was a floating platform. That's a floating stone slab. It can also be considered a law slab. There are a lot of rules left behind on it. Those are also the rules that we must abide by in the exalted celestial mountain. Only by abiding by the rules would one have the opportunity to become an exalted celestial. Jiang Lan said with a smile. Qin Yu slightly nodded. "Little Yu, let's go. Let's go and check it out. I truly wish to know what the difference between the rules this time and last time is." Jiang Lan said with a light smile. Qin Yu held onto Li Er's hand. The two of them also flew toward the summit of the mountain after Jiang Lan. On the summit of the exalted celestial mountain was a platform with a circumference of 100 meters. At this moment, over 30 god kings were gathered in this small region. Practically all of the god kings raised their heads to look at the floating slate above the platform. Floating slate. Qin Yu, Jiang Li and Jiang Lan also landed on the platform. Qin Yu's gaze was locked onto the floating slate. This floating slate was completely black. Merely, there were lines of words on the surface of the slate. All of the words had sunk into the slate. All of them were faintly emitting a golden light. The material of this slate was extremely special. Regardless of what sort of energy it was unable to touch it. Everyone present could only rely on their eyes to see it. 1. To enter and exit the exalted celestial mountain, one can only use the relief sculpture tunnel. 2. To destroy any relief sculpture in the relief sculpture tunnel is a capital offense. 3. The method to become an exalted celestial is to obtain an exalted celestial's spiritual treasure or comprehend the temporal laws. This Empyrean spirit treasure would be the new Empyrean's weapon. 4. The Empyrean spiritual treasure was nurtured within the spiritual treasure origin cauldron of the Empyrean mountain. 5. The spiritual treasure origin cauldron cannot be destroyed. Every 10 years or so, a part of the Empyrean spirit treasure will fly out of the spiritual treasure origin cauldron. An Empyrean spirit treasure flew out in 3 parts. A total of about 30 years. 6. The Empyrean spirit treasure was divided into 3 parts, each of which contained a portion of the laws of time. If a genius god king was able to comprehend the complete laws of time from just 1 or 2 portions, they would become the new Empyrean. At the same time, the other portion would automatically fly into their hands. 7. If you are unable to fully comprehend the laws of time through the split spirit treasure, then you will obtain all 3 parts of the celestial exalted spirit treasure and become a new celestial exalted. 7 rules. These 7 rules made Qin Yu's heart involuntarily jump fiercely. These 7 rules, they are truly. Qin Yu was able to guess the purpose of the person who made these rules. Fight and kill. They even specially made a complete Empyrean spiritual treasure split into 3 parts to make the battle even more desperate. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. The rules were extremely clear. If one wanted to become an Empyrean, one must obtain all 3 parts of the Empyrean spiritual treasure. If one only obtained a portion or two, if one was able to comprehend the complete laws of time from these small portions, one would become a new Empyrean. However, to comprehend the complete laws of time, that was extremely difficult. From Qin Yu's point of view, it was likely that only the first path would have the possibility of success. To obtain all 3 parts of the Empyrean spiritual treasure, there was a possibility of success on this path. But one could only imagine how bitter the battles would be. If a single person obtained a portion of the treasures, it would already be coveted by others. If one wanted to obtain all 3 portions, wouldn't that be making an enemy out of all the other divine kings in the entire God realm? Brother Yu, these rules are truly. Jiang Li also shook her head. Jiang Lan, who stood to the side, smiled and said, Li Heir, there is no need to sigh. The birth of a new Empyrean is accompanied by the fall of a large number of God Kings. This is extremely normal, although there are a lot of God Kings here right now. When the new Empyrean is born, I wonder if half of them will still be alive. Jiang Lan's voice was not loud. However, all of the other God Kings within a circumference of 100 meters heard it. Half alive? It would be pretty good if half of them could survive. Whether they live or die would depend on one's ambition. If one's ambition is too great, then one's life would be over. An aged voice sounded from the side. A black-haired, black-bearded old man said, Jiang Lan, do you still remember that 9 Netherworld God King, whose strength was comparable to the Azura God King? Back then, the 9 Netherworld God King had blocked the entrance of the floating space tunnel by himself. A single man holding the pass against 10,000 men. What sort of imposing manner was that? However, in the end, he was still killed by a group attack. 9 Netherworld God King. Jiang Lan seemed to have also recalled what had happened back then. He sighed and nodded. All of the God Kings that had survived the previous battle of the exalted celestial mountain started to chat. As for the other God Kings, they were carefully listening. They hoped to be able to gain some experience. Blocking the entrance of the floating space tunnel? After Qin Yu heard what the black-haired, black-bearded old man said, he couldn't help but have a thought. The surroundings of the exalted celestial mountain were covered by a red membrane. This red membrane was called the God King's Cage, by the Azura God King in them. From this, it could be deduced that it was impossible to break through the red membrane. Furthermore, Qin Yu was also able to sense the threatening aura that the red membrane gave him. Most importantly, among the 7 rules on the floating stone slab, there is a path. The only way to enter and exit the exalted celestial mountain is through the relief sculpture tunnel. Qin Yu also understood that although those 7 rules were called rules, they were actually 7 pieces of information. It told everyone how to become an exalted celestial. This allowed those God Kings that had not experienced the previous battle of the exalted celestial mountain to know what to do. The second of the 7 pieces of information is very peculiar. When Qin Yu thought of that piece of information, he was somewhat surprised. Destroying any of the reliefs in the relief sculpture tunnel is a capital offense. Regarding this piece of information, Qin Yu didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Although the final relief sculpture had shocked Qin Yu, there were too many reliefs in the relief sculpture tunnel. However, there were simply too many reliefs in the relief sculpture passageway, especially the ones at the very beginning. In terms of skill, most likely any immortal would be able to surpass them. For a God King to destroy a single one of those rotten reliefs was a capital offense. In the eyes of the person who had set the rules, the lives of God Kings were truly worthless. While discussing, the God Kings consciously formed small groups of 2 or 3. They could imagine how tragic the battle for the exalted celestial spiritual treasure that was about to begin. For the sake of the exalted celestial spiritual treasure that was split into 3 parts, most likely the vast majority of God Kings would cold-bloodedly slaughter each other. Friendship. Face. In front of the opportunity to become an exalted celestial, all of these were jokes. No one cared about face. Everyone was fighting with their lives, even if they knew that only one would succeed. But for the sake of that spot, everyone was willing to fight. Rumble! Suddenly, the entire exalted celestial mountain began to tremble violently. The god kings at the peak of the exalted celestial mountain couldn't help but fly into the air. The exalted celestial mountain began to tremble even more violently. Suddenly, a crack appeared on the peak of the exalted celestial mountain. In the blink of an eye, the crack became a chasm. The chasm formed by the peak of the exalted celestial mountain actually caused the exalted celestial mountain to split apart from the peak. The cracks continued to spread downwards. After spreading for hundreds of thousands of kilometers, the exalted celestial mountain finally stopped trembling. It once again regained its calm. Only, the current appearance of the exalted celestial mountain had changed greatly. The originally single peak had now split into two. At a glance, it looked like two mountain peaks. Only, although the two mountain peaks had split in half, their bases were still connected. As for the floating stone slab on the exalted celestial mountain, it was now floating between the two mountain peaks. In the deepest valley between the two mountain peaks, there were still some faint ripples. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One god king after another appeared in the valley of the exalted celestial mountain. All of the god kings had discovered something special about this place. The faintly trembling ground of the valley began to cave in. Then a huge cauldron slowly emerged. This cauldron was very simple and unadorned. The four sides of the cauldron were engraved with different totems. There were even some totems that Chinyu did not recognize. It's the numinous treasure origin cauldron, the Azura God King said with a faint smile. The last time the exalted celestial mountain descended, the Azura God King and company had seen the numinous treasure origin cauldron. This time, it was naturally easy for them to recognize it. As for the people around them who had never seen the numinous treasure origin cauldron before, when they heard the Azura God King's words, their eyes could not help but light up as they looked at the numinous treasure origin cauldron. The exalted celestial spiritual treasure was divided into 3 parts. Those 3 parts would fly out from the numinous treasure origin cauldron in order. This is the numinous treasure origin cauldron. Chinyu attempted to use his new universe's spatial energy to approach the numinous treasure origin cauldron. However, the numinous treasure origin cauldron also had an aura similar to the floating stone slab. Chinyu's spatial energy was unable to touch it at all. The numinous treasure origin cauldron was a cauldron that could nurture exalted celestial spiritual treasures. Upon seeing this cauldron, Chinyu gasped in admiration in his heart. This sort of refinement technique is already no longer my primitive refinement technique. Chinyu gasped in admiration in his heart. Without being able to study the numinous treasure origin cauldron in depth, Chinyu was also unable to understand why this numinous treasure origin cauldron was capable of nurturing spiritual treasures and even exalted celestial spiritual treasures. A portion would fly out every 10 years. Furthermore, it would be divided into 3 times. Jiangli shook her head. Li-er, to be exact, a portion would fly out every 10 years or so. It's not exactly 10 years. Jianglan said. It is precisely because it's 10 years or so, and not exactly 10 years, that the God Kings do not dare to be distracted in the slightest. Else, if they were to be careless, a portion of the exalted celestial spiritual treasures would fly out and be snatched away by others. At that time, they would definitely regret it. Although the exalted celestial spiritual treasures are divided into 3 parts, any one of them, after being bound by a drop of blood, would possess a might comparable to a first-rate grandma's spiritual treasure. Furthermore, they also contain a portion of the temporal laws. Chinyu nodded in his heart. 3 parts of the exalted celestial spiritual treasures, any one of them was extremely attractive to God Kings. Brother Yu, let's return. Jiang Li suddenly looked to Chinyu and said. Seeing Jiang Li's expression, Chinyu smiled and said, Why are you leaving so soon after arriving? Jiang Li shook her head and said, I merely felt that the surrounding atmosphere had become a bit oppressive. Many of the God Kings have become vigilant against each other, in order to prevent others from sneak attacking them. Jiang Li started to frown. Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from smiling. That was indeed the case. Merely, although those god kings had become vigilant, none of them dared to come and find trouble for Qin Yu. Amen. Qin Yu suddenly glanced at Jiang Fan in the distance. Ever since Qin Yu arrived, that Jiang Fan had been following Zhou Hua in a corner the entire time. He had not approached Qin Yu at all. He had also not greeted Qin Yu. Li Er, let's return. Qin Yu nodded and said, Uncle Lan. Qin Yu turned around and looked to Jiang Lan. Li Er and I have already discussed this. After the Fog City is completely established, we will prepare to give birth to our child. Through the acceleration of time, within a year, the child will definitely be born. Uncle Lan, how about you all return to the Fog City first, and come back to seize a portion of the exalted celestial spiritual treasure after the child is born? You're prepared to give birth? Jiang Lan's eyes immediately shined. Good. Although you said it would take 10 years or so, it would usually take 7 or 8 years. At that time, your child would likely be able to climb mountains and wade through seas. In Jiang Lan's eyes, Qin Yu and Jiang Li's child was more important than the exalted celestial spiritual treasure. I'll also return first, Yifeng said. Back then, Zuoqiumei had died. After her death, the 2 drops of soul tears of life had chosen a pair of youngsters. Now that their child was about to be born, how could Yifeng not go and see it? Immediately after, Qin Yu, Jiang Li, Jiang Lan, Yifeng and even the silent Zuoqiulin also set off. Qin Yu and the other 4 left the exalted celestial mountain and returned to the Fog City. In the ravine of the exalted celestial mountain, Jiang Fan took a glance at Qin Yu and them in the distance. His expression was still as indifferent as before. Qin Yu's rapid rise in power, and his astonishing strength time and time again. The shock to Jiang Fan was without a doubt. In the hearts of many god kings, Jiang Fan had become a joke. Merely, Jiang Fan had remained silent the entire time. Exalted Celestial. The exalted celestial spiritual treasure has been split into 3. One of them will definitely be mine. This time around, I will definitely become an exalted celestial. Jiang Fan possessed a boundless longing for the exalted celestial. As for his greatest reliance, it was that the thunder punishment exalted celestial would help him once. After looking at the direction that Qin Yu and them left, Jiang Fan closed his eyes and sat cross-legged at the corner of the ravine. Time continued to pass like this. Chapter 646. Fog City was shrouded by fog all year round. In the floating mansion above the Fog City, the Purple Mystic Mansion, Qin Yu and the other 4 god kings had returned. Purple Mystic Mansion in the Inner Lake. The Inner Lake, which had a circumference of 100 miles, was filled with fog. Following the gentle breeze, the surface of the lake would undulate slightly. A small boat could be seen slowly floating in the lake. On the small boat, Qin Yu and Jiang Li were sitting together. The 2 of them were allowing the small boat to float. At the same time, in the region where the small boat was located, the flow of time was 100,000 times faster than other regions. With Qin Yu's current strength, it was extremely easy for him to use time acceleration in the divine realm. Jiang Li leaned on Qin Yu's chest and said softly, Brother Yu, if time is accelerated by 100,000 times, doesn't that mean that Uncle Lan and the others only need to wait for several months for the child to be born? Qin Yu smiled and nodded. That's right. What we need to do now is to pass this period of leisure. As he said that, Qin Yu's right hand involuntarily stroked Li Er's beautiful hair. His left hand was placed on Li Er's stomach. Amen. Jiang Li lightly nodded. Her face also had a blissful blush. That's right. Brother Yu, when the child is born, what should we name it? Jiang Li suddenly asked. Qin Yu was slightly startled. What should we name it? At this moment, Qin Yu couldn't help but recall the time when he went to search for the Mirage Spirit Mirror. The time when he was affected by the Mirage Spirit Mirror in the Mirror Mansion. At that time, he had also experienced marrying Li Er and having a child. Qin Si, regardless of whether it's a boy or a girl, will all be called Qin Si. What do you think? Qin Yu said the name that he had decided on when he was affected by the Mirage Spirit Mirror. Qin CCC, Jiangli muttered softly. She understood the meaning behind Qin Yu's name. Soon after, she raised her head and looked at Qin Yu. Her gaze was as soft as iron, causing Qin Yu's heart to completely soften. He also looked at Jiangli. When their gazes met, it was as if they were passing through time. The first time they met was at the bottom of the sea in the mortal world. At that time, he had fainted and Jiangli had saved him. The last time they had met in the mortal world, under Zhou Xian's strong influence, he had been so helpless and sad when he parted with Li Er. Scenes of the two of them could not help but appear in their minds. Qin Yu gently lowered his head and pressed his lips against Li Er's lips. Both of them closed their eyes and enjoyed the happiness and resonance that came from their souls. Brother Yu, it's been so many years, but Fei still hasn't returned. Where did he go? Do you know? Jiangli suddenly asked. Jiangli was also concerned about Ho Fei. With a thought from Qin Yu, the spatial power of the new universe immediately spread out and covered the entire God realm. A smile appeared on Qin Yu's face. What happened? Jiangli hurriedly asked. Seeing Qin Yu's expression, she knew that something interesting must have happened. Qin Yu looked to Jiangli and said with a smile, Fei seems to have fallen in love with a girl. He is currently following behind her. You're kidding, right? Jiangli opened her eyes wide in shock. Fei, that rock lump that only knows how to use violence, has also learned how to chase after girls? Think about it. Other than him falling in love with a girl, how could he not return even once? He is extremely curious. Yet, when the exalted celestial mountain descended, he did not even bother to look at it. From this, we can determine that Fei has truly fallen in love with it. Qin Yu said with a smile. Where is that girl from? Jiangli hurriedly asked. I don't know where she is from. However, that girl is currently strolling around Yuqi City. Qin Yu said with a smile. Yuqi City. I feel that this Yuqi City is quite fated to be with me. The descent of the exalted celestial mountain had shaken practically all of the god kings in the divine realm. However, the ordinary deities, who numbered the most in the divine realm, were still living their ordinary lives. The exalted celestial mountain did not have much of a connection with them. It was so much so that they did not even know that the red clouds covering the sky and the golden light illuminating the world were caused by the descent of the exalted celestial mountain. In the eyes of deities, if a familiar person were to become a heavenly deity from a deity, it would be an extremely important matter. In the past couple days, Yuqi City's Xing Yuan had been extremely happy. That was because he had just stepped into the heavenly deity realm a couple days ago. After becoming a heavenly deity, Xing Yuan's life immediately changed. His residence that used to be cold and cheerless now had many people coming to visit him. The gazes that the surrounding people looked to him with had also become modest and respectful. However, Xing Yuan was now somewhat vexed. Brother Xing Yuan, as long as you officially become a member of the Yuqi City's army, with your current strength as a heavenly deity, you will immediately become a high-level member of the army. Furthermore, I presume you've also heard about how the Yuqi City's city lord treats the heavenly deities under his command. At this moment, across from Xing Yuan, a young man was currently advising Xing Yuan with a smile on his face. Xing Yuan remained silent. Continue to stay in Yuqi City? Xing Yuan knew very well that if he were to continue to stay in the tiny Yuqi City, the treatment that he would receive would not be bad. However, his own accomplishments, beside Xing Yuan, was his wife Ziyan. Brother Wang, I will carefully consider the suggestion of the Yuqi City's city lord. Today, Ziyan and I still have some matters to take care of. Let's talk about it again in a couple days. Xing Yuan tactfully asked the young man to leave. The young man across from Xing Yuan stood up with a smile on his face. In that case, I will respectfully await Brother Xing Yuan's good news. Only after that young man left did Xing Yuan let out a long sigh. Faced with the persuasion of the Yuqi City's city lord, he felt a huge headache. Brother Xing Yuan, what are you worried about? You're already a heavenly deity expert, yet you're still depressed. Beside him, Ziyu muttered. Xing Yuan shook his head and said with a smile, we are after all living in Yuqi City. We cannot offend the Yuqi City's city lord too much. Merely, I simply do not wish to go. The place that I wish to go the most is Fog City. Fog City? Beside him, Ziyun's eyes immediately shined. The Fog City constructed by that good friend of yours, Qinyu? Lord Qinyu is truly too powerful. I've heard that the commotion caused by the battle outside the Fog City a couple days ago, where the two god kings of the Thunder Punishment City were killed, was done by Lord Qinyu. Right now many people wish to enter the Fog City. If we were to seek shelter under Lord Qinyu, there would definitely be no need to mention how safe it would be. The impact of the two god kings' deaths was truly enormous. That world-shaking battle was soon spread out by people with intentions. Like a storm, practically all the people who paid attention to the Fog City knew about this matter. Many heavenly deities were planning to seek refuge with the Fog City. In these days, there were also heavenly deities seeking refuge with the Fog City in succession. Amen. Let's go to the Fog City. Let's go to the Fog City. Ziyun repeatedly approved of this decision. From Ziyun's point of view, firstly, Qinyu was very powerful. Secondly, Qinyu possessed a friendly relationship with them. Naturally, going to the Fog City would be much better than going to other places. Okay, let's set off immediately. If we were to stay here, there would be more troubles. Xing Yuan stood up and decided to set off immediately. Ziyun and Xing Yuan's movements were extremely fast. They quickly tidied up their residence and then left. They proceeded toward the teleportation formation of the Yuqi city. Ziyun, you ought to know that Qinyu is from our immortal devil and demon realm, right? On the street, Xing Yuan asked with a smile. Amen, what's wrong? Ziyun looked to her husband. As far as I know, many heavenly deities from the immortal devil and demon realm have gone to the Fog City. For example, those 3 purple-eyed bull demon kings outside of the Yuqi city, and a small portion of our Dark Star realm's heavenly deities have also gone to the Fog City. When we arrive, it will be very lively, Xing Yuan said with a smile. After being in the divine realm for so long, Xing Yuan had come to know many people. For example, the senior experts of the Dark Star realm. Among the experts of the Dark Star realm, the strongest were only high-level heavenly deities. Not a single one of them had become a god king. After all, becoming a god king was truly too difficult. Furthermore, the number of god kings was too small. Big brother Xing Yuan, isn't that Hou Fei? Ziyun suddenly pointed to the distance and said, how could that be? Hou Fei should be in the Fog City. As he said that, Xing Yuan followed the direction of Ziyun's finger and looked over. Upon seeing it, he was shocked. In the distance, Hou Fei wearing a yellow gown was accompanying 2 women. From time to time, he would chat and laugh with the 2 women. Hou Fei following girls? Xing Yuan was also shocked. Big brother Xing Yuan, don't look anymore. They've already walked far away. It's better that we go to the Fog City first. In the future, when we see Hou Fei, we can properly ask him. Ziyun said with a smile. Xing Yuan watched as Hou Fei and the 2 women disappeared at the end of the street. He then turned around and continued to follow Ziyun toward the teleportation formation of the Yuqi city. On the street of the Yuqi city, of the 2 women walking side by side with Hou Fei, one was wearing a red gauze gown, and the other was wearing a purple gauze gown. The purple gown girl was extremely beautiful and would cause others to love her tenderly. As for the red gown girl, she had an ice-cold expression on her face. Little Huangyu, from what you've said, it seems that your big brother is very powerful? The red-gowned girl beside Huangyu mocked with a cold expression. Hou Fei had a face filled with confidence. Of course, when you 2 meet my big brother, you'll know how astonishing his strength is. Big brother Huangyu, your big brother is very powerful, said the purple-gowned girl with a face filled with happiness. Hou Fei smiled complacently. Of course. Who do you think I, Hou Fei, am? In the many years since Hou Fei left the Purple Mystic Mansion, he had been following behind this pair of sisters the entire time, ever since he met them. These 2 women did not dislike Hou Fei either. Thus, they did not chase away Hou Fei. Hou Fei, Kuro and Qinyu. These 3 names were known by many people in the divine realm because of Qinyu. Adding on the unknown reason in Hou Fei's heart, he deliberately gave the fake name Huangyu. Originally, He wanted to say Huang Yu so that he could match up well with Qin Yu and Kuro. However, these two women only called him Huang Yu. Thus, Hou Fei could only admit that he was called Huang Yu. Little sister Zixia, don't be deceived by this glib-tongued fellow. I think that he is most likely bragging. If his big brother is truly powerful, our palace master would definitely know his name. Little Huang Yu, tell us your big brother's name, said the red-gowned girl with a cold expression. Hong Yun, Zixia. My big brother has told me that I cannot use his name to flaunt my might outside. I have also decided to not rely on my big brother. I will rely on myself. Hou Fei raised his head and said, Yo, you're quite confident. Hong Yun said. Zishan lightly pushed Hong Yun. Big sister Hong Yun, don't say it like that. Big brother Huang Yu's strength is pretty good. A few days ago, he easily defeated a low-level heavenly deity. What's a low-level heavenly deity? If you have the ability, then go and defeat a high-level heavenly deity for us to see. Hong Yun did not care at all. Even a high-level heavenly deity is only a heavenly deity. When will you reach the God King level? I, Hong Yun, will definitely look up to you, little Huang Yu. Little Huang Yu, are you a God King? Hou Fei immediately felt helpless. No. Hou Fei appeared to be powerless. Soon after, Hou Fei's eyes shined and he said, However, there will come a day when I will reach the God King level. There will come a day. Anyone can say those words. Hong Yun said with disdain. Hou Fei cursed at Hong Yun in his heart. However, he did not dare to show it on his face. From the first time he saw Zixia, he had already fallen in love with this adorable girl. Merely Hong Yun. She's as cold as a popsicle. If it wasn't for my Zixia, how could I possibly tolerate you? I would have already smashed you with my stick. Hou Fei cursed in his heart unceasingly. Little Huang Yu, we're going to eat. Prepare the food. You should know what little sister Zixia and I like to eat. Hong Yun pointed to the restaurant ahead and said. Hou Fei promptly replied, Please wait a moment. As he said that, Hou Fei rushed into the restaurant. Hong Yun and Zixia also entered the restaurant. Silver dragon lotus seed soup, white jade stewed yellow croaker. Hou Fei ordered a large pile of dishes in a very practiced manner. As for Hong Yun and Zixia, they sat on the side. Hong Yun still had a cold expression on her face. Occasionally, she would even take a glance at Hou Fei. As for Zixia, she kept looking at Hou Fei. Her eyes were filled with happiness. Fei, your sisterly heir and I are about to have a child. Are you not going to come back? A voice suddenly rang in Hou Fei's mind. Hou Fei was startled. He was stunned. Immediately, his face was filled with ecstasy. However, after a while, he helplessly looked at Zixia. He was reluctant to part with Zixia. However, his brother's child was about to be born. Zixia, Hong Yun, I have to go back first. Hou Fei helplessly said. Zixia and Hong Yun were both stunned. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 647. Big Brother Huang Yu. Zixia stood up with reluctance in her eyes. You're leaving? Hong Yun frowned and looked at Hou Fei. Hou Fei nodded helplessly. It's true. I really have something urgent to do. Zixia, Hong Yun, don't worry. I'll look for you after some time. Really? Zixia's eyes were filled with surprise. Hong Yun's eyes were also filled with surprise. However, they quickly hid it and returned to being cold. Who wants you to look for us? Hong Yun said coldly. Big brother Huang Yu. We have to go back in about 3 months. After we go back this time, we don't know when we'll be able to come out again. Zixia said. Sir, here are your dishes. At this moment, the waitresses of the restaurant served up plates of dishes. However, Hou Fei and the other two were not in the mood to eat. Go back. Zixia, you always say that you're staying in some palace. What palace is it? Where is it? Tell me and I can look for you in the future. Hou Fei asked. Zixia and Hong Yun looked at each other and shook their heads at Hou Fei. The palace master has ordered that the information of our palace cannot be revealed to the outside world. Zixia said helplessly. Even Zixia, who was the easiest to talk to, did not answer. Ho Fei knew that he could not get the information out of Zixia and Hong Yun. He thought to himself, seems like I can only ask for Big Brother's help to find out where Zixia and the others are staying. Zixia, Hong Yun, I'll make a move first. You guys go ahead and eat, Ho Fei said reluctantly. Zixia and Hong Yun stood up and sent Ho Fei out of the restaurant. Then, they watched as Ho Fei turned into a stream of light and disappeared from their sight. Sister Hong Yun, when can we come out again? Can we ask the palace master for help? She loves us a lot. Zixia looked at Hong Yun. Hong Yun frowned. With the descent of the Supreme Celestial Mountain, the palace master has been troubled by the matter of the Supreme Celestial Mountain. When we go back this time, we'd better not disturb her. After the matter of the Supreme Celestial Mountain is settled, we'll ask the palace master to come out again. It'll be easier to succeed then. Zixia nodded her head. Within a secluded courtyard within the Purple Mystic Mansion, Qin Yu stood in the middle of the courtyard as he anxiously looked at the tightly shut door of the house. Sometimes, he would even walk back and forth a few steps. In the courtyard there was not only Qin Yu, but also his father, Qin De Fenjiuzi, Qin Feng, Qin Zheng, Kuro, Ho Fei, and other good brothers. At the same time, Jiang Lan Yifeng, Zhuo Qiulin and them were also quietly waiting. Alas, Qin Yu was so anxious that he couldn't help standing up. Little Yu, calm down, Jiang Lan said from the side. Qin Yu smiled helplessly. His wife was inside. How could he hold himself back? Most importantly, Jiang Li had been in there for a very long time. I hope it'll be born soon, Qin Yu thought to himself. Then he suppressed his anxiety and sat down to wait. After a while, Qin Yu couldn't help but stand up again. Suddenly, wah! The sound of a baby crying was heard. All of the god kings in the courtyard, as well as Qin De, Qin Zheng and them who were once emperors, all stood up. As if he had been struck by lightning, Qin Yu stood there motionlessly. I have a child? Qin Yu was suddenly woken up. With a single step, he arrived before the door. Creak! Kuro's wife Bai Ling walked out from inside. Her face was filled with joy. She said repeatedly, it's a son, a very adorable boy. Qin Yu directly pushed open the door and rushed in. At this moment, there were several maids attending to Jiang Li in the room. At this moment, Jiang Li had already put on her clothes and was lovingly hugging a baby. Her eyes were staring at the baby in her bosom. Her gaze was filled with kindness and care. Qin Yu was able to sense that Jiang Li's face was emitting the radiance of a loving mother. It was very attractive. Jiang Li noticed Qin Yu. She raised her head and looked over. Smiling, she narrowed her eyes. Brother Yu, it's a boy. He's very adorable. Qin Yu immediately walked to Jiang Li's side and carefully looked at the baby in Jiang Li's bosom. The baby's black eyes were clear and without any impurities. He looked at Qin Yu curiously. Woo! The baby let out an unclear sound. Qin Yu immediately laughed. Jiang Li laughed. This child is very strange. He only cried a little when he was born. Later on he stopped crying. He has been pregnant for 36,000 years. I wonder what's so special about this child. Come, call me father, Qin Yu said to the baby. The baby stared at Qin Yu. His clear eyes seemed to be filled with confusion. Call me father, 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 Qin Yu said a few times. His own son had yet to call him father, but he had already called him father several times. Father. A somewhat shaky voice sounded. Qin Yu, who originally only had a trace of hope, was now pleasantly surprised. He felt as if his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Li-er, did you hear that? He called me father, call me father. Qin Yu excitedly took the child from Jiang Li's arms. In order to make the child feel more comfortable, Qin Yu even controlled the power of space to gently hold the child. Jiang Li's face was also filled with joy. Little C, call me mother, 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 Jiang Li said a few times to the baby. The baby opened his somewhat confused eyes and stared at Jiang Li. He guessed and said, Mother. Jiang Li was so happy that her face immediately turned red. Little C, look. Qin Yu's face was filled with smiles. A red spiritual pearl appeared in his hand. It was the Fire Origin Pearl. When the baby Qin Si saw the Fire Origin spiritual pearl, His pair of large black eyes immediately stared at the fire origin spiritual pearl. It was as if he had seen an extremely attractive treasure. Qin Yu stroked the little hand of Qin Si with one hand. Immediately, a drop of blood appeared in Qin Yu's palm. In a situation where Qin Si didn't feel any pain, Qin Yu obtained a drop of his son's blood. This drop of blood landed on the fire origin spiritual pearl and directly merged with it. Whoa! Qin Si's little mouth made a few sounds. He stretched out his fleshy little hand, and the fire origin spiritual pearl flew towards Qin Si and landed in his palm. Qin Si immediately revealed an extremely happy smile. Qin Si was an extremely intelligent child. After being pregnant for 36,000 years, Qin Si's learning ability was extremely fast. In merely 3 days, he had learned how to speak by relying on the conversations of the people around him, especially after the fire origin spiritual pearl merged with his body. Although he hadn't completely refined it, Qin Si's body had rapidly changed. He could easily run all over the ground, and even fly in the sky. He could even casually use the white pure flames. Fortunately, Qin Si was able to differentiate between people, and knew that he couldn't attack his own people. Otherwise, ordinary Qin clan disciples wouldn't be able to withstand it. Little C. Qin Yu stood at the side of the purple mystic mansion's inner lake, and shouted towards the distance. Far away from the vast surface of the water, a small fiery figure appeared. The surface of his body was burning with flames. In almost the blink of an eye, this small figure passed through space and appeared in front of Qin Yu. Qin Si's little face was red, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Father! Qin Si jumped into Qin Yu's embrace and hugged onto Qin Yu's neck. He was extremely excited and happy. Qin Yu also lovingly pinched that small face that was as soft as water. It had only been 3 months since Qin Si was born. However, Qin Si was already able to think like a 7 or 8-year-old child. As for his strength, it was terrifyingly strong. He had fused with the fire origin spiritual pearl. From this, one could imagine how astonishing his strength was. Little C, what did you do today? Tell father about it. Qin Yu said lovingly. Qin Si wrinkled his little nose and said with a childish voice, Father, today, I went to the bottom of the lake and caught several fishes. I had them play with me for a long time, before I let them leave. Father, those fishes were all very afraid of me. However, they told me many things about father. The various animals in the Purple Mystic Mansion's inner lake were obtained by Qin Yu directly from the Divine Realm's sea. Practically all of the Divine Realm's monstrous beasts were capable of speaking the human language. They were all intelligent. Those monstrous beasts did not dare to resist Qin Si. They knew that Qin Si was the little master of this place. In fact, even if they wanted to resist, they did not have the ability to harm Qin Si. It was not only Qin Si who was protected by the fire origin spiritual pearl. At the same time, Qin Yu also gave a set of second-rate defensive grandmas spiritual treasures to his son. They told you my story? What story? Qin Yu said with a smile. Qin Si fiercely nodded his head a few times. Then he said, They said that father is a god king and is very powerful. I asked them how powerful a god king is. They said that god kings are the most powerful kind. Qin Yu smiled. Those monstrous beasts of the divine realm had not even reached the deity realm. Thus the amount of information they knew was pitifully little. It was already very good for them to know about god kings. In the eyes of those monstrous beasts, god kings were invincible. Father, are god kings the most powerful? Qin Si opened his eyes wide as he looked at Qin Yu. 2 days ago, I heard from second uncle that a large number of god kings had gone to some exalted celestial mountain. It seemed that they had gone there to become exalted celestials. In that case, are exalted celestials more powerful than god kings? Hearing Qin Si's words, Qin Yu immediately started laughing. Right, exalted celestials are more powerful than god kings. Qin Yu nodded. Then what about father? Is father as powerful as an exalted celestial? Qin Si looked at Qin Yu. His eyes were filled with anticipation. In Qin Si's heart, his father was the most powerful. Chapter 648. Qin Yu said, Sky Sovereign. Father is not as powerful as the Sky Sovereign now. Once you grow up, Father will be. Oh. Qin Si nodded with a pensive expression. Suddenly, he said to Qin Yu in surprise. Father, don't you have a way to make me grow up faster? Let me grow up. Once I grow up, Father will be as powerful as the Sky Sovereign. Qin Yu was startled. Then he laughed involuntarily. Qin Yu was able to use time acceleration to make Qin Si grow up faster. However, the evolution of the universe was not something that could be accelerated by time acceleration. What's wrong? Father, what are you laughing about? Is my method not good? Qin Si looked at Qin Yu and asked in confusion. No, Father is happy, very happy. Qin Yu said with a smile. Little Si, in a few days, Father will be holding a 100 days celebration for you. At that time, your grandpa Jiang and the others will have to give you gifts. Qin Yu rubbed Qin Si's little nose. Gifts? Qin Si's eyes lit up. Father, how about you hold more birthday celebrations for me? Qin Si said slyly. Last time, we held a full moon celebration. This time, we will hold a 100 days celebration. After that, we will hold another half a year, 9 months, 1 year. Qin Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Qin Yu still remembered the scene of Qin Si hugging so many gifts during the full moon celebration. That was simply too adorable. A little brat hugging gifts that were even taller than him and running all over the place. How was it not adorable? Little Si, holding a full moon and 100 days celebration is the custom of Father's hometown. Do you understand? After this year, you will only be able to hold birthdays in the future. Qin Yu carefully taught Qin Si. Within the Universal Palace Hall of the Purple Mystic Mansion, familiar people sat down one by one. Everyone was laughing. Qin Si, who was wearing a red tutu, was running around the Universal Palace Hall like a fairy. Little Si, come to Grandpa. Qinda stretched out his hand. Qin Si's dark eyes glanced at Qinda, but he didn't immediately go over. Instead, he stared at Qinda's hands. Qinda smiled and flipped his hand to take out a wooden carving toy. This wooden carving toy moved slightly and became a flying toy. Wow! Qin Si transformed into a beam of red light and rushed into Qinda's bosom. She took the wooden toy and began to play with it carefully. Qinda had gone to the immortal, devil and demon realm and invited a skilled craftsman to craft this wooden carving toy. The craftsman had spent a great deal of effort to craft this wooden carving toy. It could transform into many different kinds of toys. Furthermore, it could fly, walk, make sounds, and so on. Grandpa, Grandpa Jiang, Grandpa Yi, Grandma Zhuqiu, why aren't they here yet? Qin Si asked Qinda. Qinda smiled and said, Don't worry, Grandpa Jiang and the others went to the exalted celestial mountain to take a look. They'll be back soon. Celestial Worthy Mountain? Even Grandpa Jiang and the others like to go there. I want to go there too. Qin Si said in a low voice. His round eyes were fixed on Qinda. Grandpa, bring me there, okay? Qinda stroked Qin Si's little head. Little Si, even Grandpa hasn't gone there once. How could I bring you there? Oh! Qin Si immediately lowered his head in depression. At this moment, footsteps suddenly sounded. Jianglan, Yifeng, Zhuqiulin and them walked in from outside the Universal Palace Hall. Qin Yu also walked in beside them. Haha, I'm starting to regret going to the exalted celestial mountain. Qin Yu said with a self-mocking smile. Oh, what's going on? Qin Feng, who was in the palace hall, directly asked. Qin Yu said with a smile. This time, when I accompanied Uncle Lan and them to the exalted celestial mountain, when Uncle Lan and them arrived, the god kings of the exalted celestial mountain immediately became nervous. They seemed to be extremely strict with each other. However, Uncle Lan later told some of his acquaintances that my son was born. Those god kings all gave Little Si a lot of gifts. Gifts? Qin Si's eyes shined. Like a monkey, he immediately jumped onto Qin Yu's body. He hugged onto Qin Yu's neck and hung onto Qin Yu's body. Dad, where are the gifts? Come down first, I'll give them to you. Qin Yu said. Qin Si's reaction was extremely fast. In an instant, he jumped down from Qin Yu's body. He then took several steps back and looked at Qin Yu. Qin Yu immediately waved his sleeve. A lot of peculiar little toys immediately appeared in front of Qin Si. The gifts he gave Qin Si were mostly novel and fun. Most of them were not extremely precious. At the very most, they were third-rate grand spiritual treasures. Merely, these sort of items were indeed very good to give to a child. Wow! Qin Si's eyes were wide open. His black eyes were filled with pleasant surprise. The banquet was extremely lively. Qin Yu and Jiang Li looked at their son's adorable performance. They both narrowed their eyes with smiles. However, after playing around for a while, Qin Si ran into Jiang Li's bosom and fell asleep. Little Yu, the three of us have finished our preparations. In 3 days, we will go to the Exalted Celestial Mountain until the first portion of the Exalted Celestial Spiritual Treasure appears. Jiang Lan said to Qin Yu, "That urgent? Isn't it still very early?" Qin Yu was a bit confused. After all, the floating steel stated that it would take about 10 years. However, it was not even a year yet. If they were to go so urgently, would they be wasting time there? Jiang Lan shook his head and said, "No, could it be that you didn't discover it when we went to check out the situation this time around? The hidden battle there has already become extremely intense. We must go there earlier and establish good relationships with some people. Otherwise, in the end, even if we manage to obtain one of the 3 portions of the Exalted Celestial Spiritual Treasure, the other God Kings would likely come and attack us." Yifeng also nodded to Qin Yu and said, "Qin Yu, you ought to remember the God King's cage and the relief sculpture tunnel, right? The God King's cage covers the entire Exalted Celestial Mountain, causing all of the God Kings to have to rely on the relief sculpture tunnel in order to leave. As for the entrance to the relief sculpture tunnel, it is not wide. As long as a single person blocks the entrance, the others would have to defeat that person in order to enter. At that time, if the Azura God King were to block the entrance, then even if we were to obtain one of the 3 portions of the Exalted Celestial Spiritual Treasure, we would likely not be able to take it away." Qin Yu nodded. The Exalted Celestial Mountain was like a cage. After entering it, one could only leave through the relief sculpture tunnel. As for the relief sculpture tunnel, it was 10,000 meters long. Furthermore, one could not fly or teleport in it. As long as there was a person powerful enough to block the entrance, then the others would not be able to leave even if they wanted to. Thus, we should first go and rope in some alliances and establish good relationships with them, so that we can prepare for the final contest. Jiang Lan said, "The Exalted Celestial Spiritual Treasure was divided into 3 portions. It was not the only piece. This caused everyone to not immediately fight to the death for a single portion." "Good." Qin Yu nodded. At the same time, Qin Yu had decided in his heart that after Uncle Lan and them went to the Exalted Celestial Mountain, he would use his new cosmos' spatial energy to carefully observe the interior of the Exalted Celestial Mountain through the relief sculpture tunnel. The new cosmos' spatial energy was unable to touch the spiritual treasure origin cauldron, the floating slate, and the God King's cage. As for the relief sculpture tunnel, Qin Yu's spatial energy was able to easily penetrate through it. After the banquet was over, everyone had left the Universal Palace Hall. Qin Yu and Jiang Li walked side by side toward their residence. Jiang Li was still carrying the sleeping Qin Si in her bosom. "Qin Yu." Suddenly a voice sounded. That voice was extremely familiar. This voice, it's so familiar. Qin Yu's heart suddenly quivered. He had remembered whose voice this was. It was the voice of the silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster, who had gifted him the 3 first-rate grand spiritual treasures. Qin Yu immediately turned around. Jiang Li also turned around and looked over. A silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster was smiling at Qin Yu. On the back of his head, there were 3 crest-like black horns. "Hello." The silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster bowed to Qin Yu and said, "Last time, I represented my master and gave you 3 gifts. And now, Qin Yu, you are truly married and have a child." When Qin Yu recalled the scene from back then, he couldn't help but sigh endlessly. It had only been a short period of time since the scene from back then. However, the change in him was too great. He had eloped with Jiang Li and completely opposed the sage emperors. Until now, he had stood tall in the divine realm with absolute strength. Thank you. May I know who you are? Even now, I still don't know your name. Qin Yu hurriedly said. You can call me Krevkor. The silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster said with a smile. Krevkor? This name is very special. Qin Yu said with a smile. The silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster smiled and said, compared to the names of the people of the divine realm, my name is indeed somewhat special. The reason why I came today is because in a while, my master will personally come here to congratulate you, Qin Yu, on your marriage and the birth of Lin. Your master. Qin Yu's heart twitched. Even now, Qin Yu was still unable to determine the strength of this silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster. Even if the Azura God King was in front of him, he would not give him such a feeling. Then what about this youngster's master? A few days ago, my master had important matters to take care of. Thus, he did not have the time to come over during your marriage. Originally, he had planned to rush over when your son was 100 days old, Qin Yu. However, from the looks of it now, he would not be able to make it in time. Qin Yu, wait a moment. My master will be here soon. The silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster said with a smile. If the thunder punishment exalted celestial were to see the cold and emotionless floating feathers exalted celestial speak like this, he would definitely be so shocked that his eyes would pop out. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 649. Wait a bit longer? Qin Yu would naturally not mind. This silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster by the name of Krevkor possessed such unfathomable strength. His master possessed sufficient strength to make him wait a bit longer. Furthermore, this silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster's master had given him 3 gifts. He had yet to thank him. Brother Yu, is he the mysterious person that you spoke of who gave you 3 grand mist spiritual treasures? Jiangli said to Qin Yu via mind voice transmission. Seeing the appearance of the person before her, Jiangli recalled the appearance of the person that Qin Yu had mentioned to her. The person who had given him 3 first-rate grand mist spiritual treasures. The silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster lightly smiled at Qin Yu. After that, he stood there without saying a word. He quietly waited. The curtain of night had already descended. At this moment, only the dim light of the distant lanterns could faintly illuminate this quiet corridor. Qin Yu saw that the silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster did not have the desire to speak. Thus, he did not start a conversation. As for Jiangli, she quietly stood to the side while hugging the sleeping Qin Si. Ho! Suddenly wind began to blow. This wind was extremely strange. It had appeared for no reason at all. This caused Qin Yu to be on guard. Suddenly, a figure slowly walked over from the distant sky. As if he was walking down a flight of stairs, he walked down from the sky. With every step he took, it was as if he was stepping on the pulse of the entire space. Qin Yu did not know what was going on with the distant figure. He was simply unable to see the figure clearly. Even with the help of the hazy lanterns, he was still able to see that the surroundings of the figure were blurry. Only when the figure walked down from the sky and entered the corridor did the figure become clear. His height was about the same as Qin Yu's. Merely, he appeared to be even more robust than Qin Yu. His entire being gave off a feeling of being as heavy as a mountain, yet as graceful as the wind. Dignified and elegant. 2 completely different styles appeared on this person's body. Buzz! When this person approached Qin Yu, the spatial fluctuations around Qin Yu and the others were actually different from the spatial fluctuations of the outside world. It was as if they were 2 different spatial regions. It's not spatial freezing. Instead, it's changing the spatial fluctuations? Qin Yu was astonished. Spatial fluctuations could be changed? Qin Yu had never dared to imagine that. Master! The silver-haired, silver-eyed young man immediately bowed respectfully. Yes. The silhouette nodded gently. The silver-haired, silver-eyed young man stood up straight and walked to the side of the silhouette. He stood still like a guard. Qin Yu looked at the person carefully. The first thing he noticed was the person's eyes. The eyes were the windows to the soul. The moment Qin Yu saw this person's eyes, he felt his soul tremble. It was as if his heart had been pierced by someone. Sword. What a powerful sword, Qi. Just his gaze alone is enough to cause my soul to tremble. Qin Yu felt fear in his heart. Such a character was simply too terrifying. It even gave Qin Yu the urge to flee to the Neoverse with his loved ones. An ordinary gaze was enough to make Qin Yu's soul tremble. If this person wanted to deal with Qin Yu, then killing Qin Yu would be a piece of cake. However, that gaze also contained cordial kindness. That was why Qin Yu was not too nervous. I am Qin Yu. May I know who you are? Qin Yu asked politely. The person who had arrived had a head of long dark brown hair. His eyes were as deep and serene as the abyss. He had an amiable smile on his face. His broad shoulders gave others a feeling of steadiness and steadiness. His body that was as beautiful as a leopard's made others feel the speed, power and agility that he possessed. A nearly perfect person. Qin Yu had to admit. This was the person who had caused his heart to tremble the most in his countless years of life. The person before him was not as handsome as Duan Muyu. He was not as cold as Kuro. However, he possessed a special sort of temperament. Hello, I am Qin Yu. This is our first time meeting. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am called Lin Meng. Lin Meng said with a smile. Senior Lin Meng, this is my wife Jiang Li. This is my son Qin Si. He is currently asleep. Qin Yu said politely. This Lin Meng's strength was too frightening. His disciple, the silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster, was able to cause Qin Yu to tremble in fear. As for Lin Meng, he was much more frightening than the silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster. For such a person, Qin Yu should address him as senior. Lin Meng shook his head with a faint smile. There is no need to address me as senior. If you don't mind, you can address me as second brother. Second brother? Qin Yu could not help but feel puzzled. Even the silver-haired, silver-eyed youngster behind Lin Meng looked at Lin Meng with a puzzled expression. Why did he want Qin Yu to address him as second brother? Could it be that there was someone who wanted Qin Yu to address him as big brother, or third brother and so on? You only need to address me as second brother. In the future, you will naturally understand. Lin Meng said with a faint smile. Qin Yu smiled. Second brother. Qin Yu bowed respectfully. Beside him, Jiang Li also bowed. Second brother. Haha. Lin Meng started laughing loudly. However, even though Lin Meng was laughing, he gave off an extremely calm sensation. Qin Yu, sister-in-law. There is no need to be so courteous. This must be your child, right? He is indeed very adorable. Oh, the Fire Origin spiritual pearl has not been completely refined yet. Lin Meng extended his hand. When Lin Meng extended his hand, one could not help but look at it. Although Lin Meng's hand appeared ordinary, it was emitting a faint sparkling and translucent radiance. Lin Meng's right hand lightly brushed against Qin Si's body. Immediately, Qin Si's body started to burn with flames. Amen. Qin Si opened his sleepy eyes and rubbed his eyes. Qin Si sensed the flames emitting from his body. Suddenly his drooping eyes opened. His gaze shone. Ah, the Fire Origin spiritual pearl has been completely refined. Yay! This is great! This is great! Qin Si was extremely pleasantly surprised. As for Qin Yu and Jiang Li beside him, although they were overjoyed, they were also incomparably shocked. With merely a wave of his hand, he was able to completely refine a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure in an instant. What sort of remarkable ability was this? Qin Yu was simply unable to comprehend it. This had already surpassed the scope of Qin Yu's understanding. Father, who is he? Qin Si pulled on Qin Yu's sleeve and pointed his little finger at Lin Meng. Qin Yu immediately said, Little Si, he is your father's second brother that I have just gotten to know. You can address him as second uncle. Second uncle? Qin Si pouted his little mouth as he looked to Linda. Then, in a very adorable manner, he shouted, Second uncle. Hearing those words, Lin Meng immediately started to laugh. Second uncle, ever since I was born, my father and the others, or even my grandfather and the others, have given me several gifts. My second uncle has also given me several gifts. Second uncle, what about you? Qin Si said those words one word at a time. Lin Meng laughed involuntarily. I have already given you a gift. That Fire Origin spiritual pearl is something that I have given you a long time ago. Lin Meng said with a smile. Is that so? Qin Si turned around to look at his father. Qin Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Little Si, how could you ask for a gift like that? However, that fire origin spiritual pearl was indeed given to you by your second uncle Lin Meng. Oh, in that case, second uncle can give me one less gift. However, father, you still owe me a gift. Qin Si's calculations were extremely accurate. Qin Si looked to Lin Meng and blinked his eyes. However, he did not say anything. Lin Meng smiled. He extended his hand, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. Lin Meng handed the golden spear to Qin Si. Little Si, this spear cannot be considered to be a treasure. It is only on the same level as the fire origin spiritual pearl. I will give it to you as a toy. Play with it properly. Qin Yu and Jiang Li were overwhelmed with shock. A spear that he had casually grabbed was a first-rate grandmas spiritual treasure. Furthermore, he even said that it cannot be considered to be a treasure and a toy. Those words rendered Qin Yu speechless. Even a first-rate grandmas spiritual treasure was given to a child as a toy. From this, one could tell how frightening this Lin Meng was. Qin Yu, don't overthink it. Soon, you will not be much inferior to me, Lin Meng said to Qin Yu with an amiable smile. Your stellar transformations martial technique is not the slightest bit inferior to my martial technique. Qin Yu's heart began to race. He had already deduced a lot of things in his heart. Second brother, I wish to ask, do you know who will become the new Exalted Celestial in this battle of the Exalted Celestial Mountain? Qin Yu asked directly. Lin Meng smiled and said, your question is rather direct. However, I can tell you vaguely. In this battle of the Exalted Celestial Mountain, not a single one of the people present will become an Exalted Celestial. Not a single one? Not even the Azura God King? Qin Yu immediately thought of a lot of things. Qin Yu naturally had some guesses about the identity of the person before him. Qin Yu was more than half certain that this Lin Meng, before him, was likely the master of the divine realm cosmos. Of course, this was only a guess. Qin Yu did not dare to ask. Merely, the strength of this person before him was, without a doubt, terrifyingly powerful. He was even more frightening than an Exalted Celestial. Qin Yu had seen the unfettered Exalted Celestial. Qin Yu had a feeling that an Exalted Celestial was simply incomparable to the Lin Meng before him. Qin Yu, don't know too much about the future. Otherwise, it will be meaningless. However, I can tell you this: not long from now, you will have a child. Lin Meng said to Qin Yu with a smile. Qin Yu and Jiang Li were startled. Another child? Chapter 650. Haha, the more children the better. To tell the truth, I like children the most. But if there are too many children, Li Er will suffer. Qin Yu laughed as he spoke. Li Er couldn't help but blush slightly. Qin Yu immediately said, second brother, let's not stand in the corridor and talk. Let's go to my courtyard and sit down and talk. What do you think? Fine. Lin Meng smiled and nodded. And then Qin Yu, Jiang Li, Lin Meng, the silver-haired, silver-eyed youth Krevkor, as well as Qin Si, who was jumping up and down on the ground, occasionally brandishing his golden spear, all walked towards Qin Yu's residence. Within the courtyard next to an ancient tree, Qin Yu and Lin Meng were seated facing each other, while the silver-haired, silver-eyed Krevkor stood behind Lin Meng like a guard. Krevkor, you go back first. I'll go back myself in a bit, Lin Meng said to the silver-haired, silver-eyed youth behind him. The silver-haired, silver-eyed youth immediately bowed. Yes, master. And then with a slight movement, the silver-haired, silver-eyed youth disappeared from Qin Yu's sight. Li Er, take little Si back to your room and have a good rest, Qin Yu said to the nearby Jiang Li. Jiang Li nodded obediently, then led Qin Si into her room. Immediately, only Qin Yu and Lin Meng were left in the courtyard. The wind blew. A jug of wine. 2 wine cups. Qin Yu, I really admire you. Do you know that? Lin Meng raised his wine cup, and this was the first thing he said. Admire me? Qin Yu was somewhat puzzled. In the past, when you acquired Lei Wei's half-baked stellar transformations technique, the stellar transformations technique could only be considered an extremely ordinary training technique. It was just a bit of a novelty, But afterwards, you made several changes in succession, allowing the stellar transformations technique to reach an unprecedented level of success. You, without anyone's help, you were able to reach your current level. I admire you, because when I reached your current level, it was with the help of others, Lin Meng said with a self-mocking smile. Qin Yu looked at Lin Meng in surprise. Lin Meng knew that he had a new universe? Qin Yu, that black hole boundary of yours was truly amazing. You were actually able to connect your Dantian space to the Grand Mist space in a single step. When I first discovered it, I was truly stunned. Lin Meng sighed in admiration. In the past, I also comprehended the theory that there is a universe within the human body. But I never thought that I could connect the human body's Dantian space to the Grand Mist space. After all, before this, no one knew of the existence of the Grand Mist space. You also didn't know of it, but you succeeded. What a freak. He was lucky. Haha. Actually, the success of a genius also requires a bit of luck. Lin Meng laughed loudly. It's not good, it's not good. Because of the rules, you haven't completely succeeded, so there are many things you can't say. However, it won't be long. A few decades will be enough. Lin Meng's face was full of smiles. Qin Yu's heart stirred. What does Lin Meng mean by that? A few decades will be enough? Doesn't that mean that a few decades will be enough for my new universe to completely evolve? Qin Yu had some understanding of the evolution speed of a new universe. A universe was divided into 3 layers. The mortal realm was 1 layer, the immortal devil and demon realm was 1 layer, and the divine realm was 1 layer. Among them, the mortal realm was the largest and most vast. It was also the most time-consuming. The higher one went, the less space one needed to evolve. Thus, the time consumption would also be much less. In comparison, the number of cosmic spaces was 100 times greater. It was indeed possible for the entire universe to completely evolve in a few decades. After talking about the stellar transformation martial technique, Qin Yu began to casually chat with Lin Meng. The two of them chatted and talked about all kinds of strange things. They talked to their heart's content. The dark curtain of night dissipated and the light of day arrived. Qin Yu and Lin Meng were still sitting across from each other at the round table. Second brother, I want to ask, why is the spiritual treasure origin cauldron of the exalted celestial mountain able to refine an exalted celestial spiritual treasure? Qin Yu was puzzled. Lin Meng smiled. You don't have to ask about this for now. In a few decades, you will naturally understand even if you don't ask. Qin Yu smiled bitterly. Second brother, I've discovered that when I ask you about the divine realm, you always don't answer me directly. Instead, you always speak in riddles. Haha, there's nothing I can do about it. Rules, rules. I must abide by the rules. Lin Meng said while laughing. In that case, what is the name of the exalted celestial spiritual treasure that will appear this time? You can at least tell me about it, right? Qin Yu asked. Lin Meng smiled helplessly and said, Alright, this can't be considered as important information. The exalted celestial spiritual treasure that will appear after the descent of the exalted celestial mountain is called the Living World Seal. Living World Seal? Qin Yu knew nothing about it. According to the rules, this Living World Seal will split into 3 parts. These 3 parts will fly out from the spiritual treasure origin cauldron, about 10 years apart. These 3 parts all contain a portion of the temporal laws. Lin Meng said with a smile. Living World Seal split into 3 parts. Qin Yu nodded in his heart. The Living World Seal can split into 3 parts to begin with. After the Living World Seal is split into 3 parts, it will become 3 seals with power equivalent to first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. They are the Blue Sky Seal, the Back Earth Seal, and the strongest seal, the All-People Seal. However, becoming an exalted celestial is not something that can be determined by strength alone. It depends on one's karma, Lin Meng said with a smile. Karma? Qin Yu was stunned. Who becomes an exalted celestial depends on karma. This was the first time he had heard of this word. He had never heard of the word karma from exalted celestials or god kings. Oh, this karma can also be called contribution, Lin Meng said with a smile. It is a contribution to the universe. As for the amount of contribution, it is determined by the public. What is karma? It is not something that you think it is. Not to mention you, even exalted celestials do not understand what karma is. Is karma saving people? If you save millions upon millions of people, you will not receive any karma. If you kill millions upon millions of people, you will not lose any karma. The definition of karma was not something that ordinary people could understand. Second brother, according to what you said, the exalted celestial is determined by karma. Is there no point in fighting for it? Chinyu was puzzled. During the battle at Exalted Celestial Mountain, the fight for the split Exalted Celestial Numinous Treasure was completely useless. If the Exalted Celestial who was about to be born was secretly determined, then what was the point of fighting for it? No, it is useful, Lin Meng said with a smile. That is because each of the 3 parts of the Exalted Celestial Numinous Treasure contains a portion of the laws of time. Once they obtain it, even if they do not become an Exalted Celestial, it will also allow them to gain a deeper understanding of the laws of time. They might even be able to become an Exalted Celestial through their own efforts. But no Exalted Celestial in history has ever succeeded through their own efforts. Chinyu said again. Just because no one in history does not mean that it is impossible, Lin Meng said with a smile. Chinyu was stunned for a moment before he laughed. Right. For example, the Azura God King. He had already comprehended time stop. If he were to comprehend time reversal, through the Exalted Celestial Numinous Treasure, naturally, he would become an Exalted Celestial expert. However, comprehending this final step would be very difficult. All right. Lin Meng stood up and raised his head to look at the sky. It is already dawn. It is time for me to return. Lin Meng stared at Chinyu and said with a smile, let's look forward to our next meeting in a few decades. The next time we meet, we will be able to talk openly, and without any reservations. See you in a few decades, Chinyu said with a smile as well. The two looked at each other and smiled. Then, Lin Meng's body began to dim. Like a phantom, he disappeared before Chinyu's eyes. Karmic virtue. The definition of karmic virtue is most likely determined by the master of this universe, the deity realm. Chinyu shook his head and laughed in his heart. He no longer thought about it. To him, exalted celestials held no attraction at all. Thus, karmic virtue was of no use to him. His path should be to pursue the evolution of the universe. The Exalted Celestial Numinous Treasure, Living World Seal. The Living World Seal is divided into 3 parts. One is the Blue Sky Seal, one is the Back Earth Seal, and one is the People Seal. I wonder, which one will be the first to appear? Chinyu looked to the west. At the same time, his new cosmos's spatial energy rapidly covered the entire divine realm like a violent wave. Chinyu's new cosmos's spatial energy passed through the relief sculpture tunnel and entered the Exalted Celestial Mountain. In an instant, it entered the ravine that contained the spiritual treasure origin cauldron. Merely, Chinyu's new cosmos's spatial energy was unable to touch the spiritual treasure origin cauldron. Several days later, Jiang Lan, Zuoqiulin and Yifeng entered the Exalted Celestial Mountain. The 3 of them quickly blended into the Exalted Celestial Mountain. They clearly established their relationship with the various powers. The various God Kings were all restraining themselves. When the Exalted Celestial's spiritual treasure did not appear, all of the God Kings were able to endure it. However, once the Exalted Celestial's spiritual treasure appeared, all of the 40+ God Kings present would fight over it with their lives on the line. Time passed as they waited. In a blink of an eye, 8 years have passed. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.